Actually, yes.
Okay. Welcome, fellow Earthlings. Welcome to Nakasuchi. I, as you may notice from the voice, am not Nakasuchi. I am John Peterson, or as I'm known on my newly launched channel, the Amateur Conversationalist. Emphasis on the amateur. And tonight I am joined by Sock Account, Richard Madsen, Dragnot, and Cerberus Hex. And we are going to talk about whatever the hell comes up. I do want to take a minute and plug a couple things. This Saturday on the GDC, the feature channel of the week is going to be In Time, a newly launched channel by Nick Suter and Ansgar Odinson. And the topic that night is going to be Hong Kong and what the U.S. role in Hong Kong should be. I'm going to drop this on him live. I forgot to ask him. I meant to ask him, before we started, but I told those two they could decide who the other three panelists would be. They asked me to reach out to Dr. Misha Griffith and Steve McCrae and Sock Account. So Sock Account, you have an invite to join us Saturday night if you're able to.
Yeah, Hong Kong. That is a fun topic.
All right, I will mark you down for that.
So how many kids do you have in Hong Kong, Soccer?
I've only been there once, so maybe two.
Maybe two. I thought it was you're supposed to have a sweetheart in every port, but you have offspring in every port, Saka?
It kind of goes together,
Okay, yeah, I guess if you're doing it right, it does go together. The other thing I wanted to plug is a week from tonight at 7:15 p.m. Eastern, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Misha Griffith, Jerry Griffith, Dr. Josh Bowen, and Megan Lewis, and Callan, and we're going to talk about Norse mythology. And that should be, a very fun time, very interesting. And I ask that you join us and look for more about that later in the week. I'll tweet out about it and whatnot, just to throw a whatnot out there since Dragnot's in the house. So as I said, tonight we're going to talk about whatever comes up. Originally, we were going to talk about the topic of logic and different things surrounding that, but a couple of the guests that were going to be here for that were unable to make it, so I left it up to Saka because I threw this stream together. I wasn't even going to be doing a stream tonight, and I noticed Saka was back in town for a few days from sailing 7 seas. And as I said, for the last few weeks, there's been this Saka-sized hole in my heart. And so I decided I best have a stream tonight and take advantage of his presence. So, Sock Account, what's going on with you?
So not a lot right now. I'm got a temporary kind of like shore visit here, so I get to stay home for a bit. So I'm on vacation for another 9 days until I go back out and do that stuff that I do. And yeah, like you're saying, we started discussing this. Like, well, what do we want to talk about? And I was talking with a couple people, and Ozymandias was there, and it was like, there's like this topic that I've always wanted to kind of get into, and it's like justifications of logic, as well as talking about things like logical realism, and I wanted to get more into that. And unfortunately, because we're kind of throwing it together there, weren't able to get everybody to kind of dedicate for tonight, which is okay, but ended up building into the possibility of another hangout or show coming up where we're going to be discussing this idea of justifications for logic. But then, so it's just like, well, what are we going to do instead? And it's just like, well, I don't know, the same shit that we always do, which is just get together and just talk shit. Like, why not? Let's have fun. Like, whatever people want to talk about, if anybody wants to has any ideas, throw it out there in the external chat. Other than that, it's a relatively free form conversation where Richard Madsen has decided that he's going to be sacrificial lamb for us here, and we're just going to pick on him until someone gives us a better topic.
I like that idea.
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is a good idea. And then as Dragnaut informed me, we may be joined by Aaron Benton a little later. And that was a good idea, Saka. Yeah, if there's in the external chat and live chat, if there's anybody out there that has an interesting topic they'd like to hear folks here discuss, please throw that suggestion out there. How are you doing tonight, Richard Batson?
I'm doing very well. Peace and respect to you all. I look forward to the day that we're better friends. So I guess I'll just make an assertion and then we can start right into it. What do you think, guys?
Yeah, sure.
Go for it.
Okay. So I'm going to assert that in Deuteronomistic law, that in the Old Testament, the rules on slavery never have a stipulation for the slave or proposed slave to have a father that has passed away, that has died, and in other things there would be some kind of uncle or brother or some other stipulation. And I think that this indicates that the father of the slave cannot die. That is to say, God.
What?
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to clarify that a little bit.
Well, the reason that there's no stipulation within the rules in the Old Testament on slavery, that there'd be a stipulation that if the father of the slave had died, there's no such stipulation because the father that they're referring to is capital F father, meaning God.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, you take a look at like all the different translations of the Bible there. You know, there's, well, I will agree. I'm not sure if you'll agree, but there is some ambiguity between how God is defined, you know, depending on, you know, whether you're reading in the Old Testament or the New Testament, or even what part of the Old Testament you're reading, whether it's like Yahweh or Elohim or, you know, any of these, you know, names or gods that are put out there, that, you know, that it doesn't fall in line with kind of a textual criticism that, you know, in this instance that they're going to be using father in that way. I mean, that's something that you can be probably easily kind of diagnosed through kind of an evaluation of the Greek or the the Deuteronomy, so like the Hebrew texts there. But like, do we see that type of designation that, you know, that well, in this one instance, or is there multiple instances where the word for father is used in Deuteronomy is also the same word for father when describing God? Because this is also Deuteronomy, so this is before a notion of the Trinity. So even the notion of God at that time, you know, being referenced by one of his beings or one of his natures as the Father wouldn't even have been really contained in those texts as well.
Yeah, you wouldn't think so. And of course, traditionally, no one would look at it this way that I know of. But actually, in definition, it works quite well. In the etymology of the word, it does work. Well,
I mean, I can understand that, but I mean, that's applying a different kind of a textual criticism to it that you're not going to find.
Oh, definitely.
You're not going to find that amongst a popular opinion by scholars, mainly because there's really not a lot of support for that. I mean,
yeah, there's none.
Yeah,
none, zero.
I was being generous when I said not a lot, but yeah.
The extreme of not a lot, as in zero. Yeah.
Yeah. So if there's, I guess if there's no, you know, scholars that are kind of agreeing with that, how do you know that's not, I guess, technically you reading into the Bible what you perceive rather than what the Bible's trying to tell, right? The difference between eisegesis versus exegesis.
Well, I think the answer to that is until age 42, when I was shown this, I was an anti-theist. That is, I didn't want any of it to be true.
Right.
So I wasn't trying to prove it. I wasn't trying to prove it true in any way. In fact, I was trying to disprove it so I could keep my atheism.
So I think that it almost sounds like the way that you were reading into the text is to make the story a bit. I don't want to say, you know, you're trying to whitewash it, but it almost seems like you're trying to almost downplay what's happening there by most other accounts, right? And it's I'm not trying to, you know, impugn your ability to discern.
I won't cry. I won't cry. Keep going.
Yeah. No, I'm trying to be. I just came from outside and walking hot. But it is interesting that you read it that way. But for me, my understanding is that when God, as in the Father God, is referenced, there's a specific word used, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if it's the pronoun usage of God, like we would, or whether it is more of a contextual reference to God. And I would have to get with someone like Dr. Josh to see, like, what is the actual, Greek or Hebrew word used there, to see if that coincides with the other usages where God is named, specifically.
Mm-hmm. Well, normally definition in the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, definition 1, AWB, AWB, literally means father. But it can be a literal or immediate or figurative and remote sense, and it can be applied in any of those ways. The most direct translation would be chief or chief person, father. So actually, if you look up the word father, almost every definition throughout the text, and by almost every, I mean more than 90% of it, the word father used is actually definition number 1, meaning literally the chief father God.
But not for that word. No, like that word is used in the Old Testament for father.
Right.
And rarely is it referred to, like, I mean, you can draw a definition for that. Like, yeah, we have this kind of notion of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, or Holy Spirit through the Trinity. But in the context of the Old Testament, when it's written, when that word's used, in every other context, it's always referring to a biological father of some sort. You're reading into this one special exception at this point in time.
Oh, no, I only cited one example. That's not the same thing as cherry picking.
Oh, I never said it was cherry picking.
Well,
but now that you bring it up,
it would be.
it's
I mean,
fucking cherry picking.
What you said is that would be cherry. I would accuse myself, but I would also simultaneously defend that actually, as I said, there are a lot of occurrences of the word father, and more than 90% of them are definition number 1. In the original text, it literally meant capital F father.
Can we get the verse again? Because service just got back, and I caught it while I was walking, but I would like to look at it, because if we're talking about beating the father, correct? That was the reference.
I'm sorry, I missed a word there. Did you say beating?
Was it beating the father, or was it? Can you say it again?
I said in the slavery laws, it refers to the slave, the master, and the father. And there's no stipulation for the father being passed away. And I said that in the context as I understand it, the father can't pass away, and that's because it's referring to capital F father, who doesn't die of old age. And the slavery laws are actually talking about master meaning Christ, father meaning God, and slave meaning deist, a believer.
Okay, so what verse is this?
Oh, well, I didn't quote you a verse actually, but my brain is terrible with numbers. Like I barely remember my own birthday, and certainly none of my siblings' birthdays.
He did refer to Deuteronomy.
Yeah, there's laws in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, and there's many references saying father. I guess I could find one for you pretty quick.
Okay, I'm looking them up now. I don't know where I got beating from. I was probably listening to someone on the way home, but yes, no, these are Exodus, release of slaves. I see Deuteronomy 15, 12 through 17, but I'm not seeing that it references father.
6.
So a quick search sees a mention of father 3 times in Deuteronomy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all of them referring actually to a plural sense of the word. So Deuteronomy. Oh, actually, hold on a second. That's never mind. That's just Deuteronomy 28.
Well,
let me get back to you on that one. Hold
father's plural would mean ancestry, right?
In one case, yeah, here.
Okay. So I see in listings in small print in the Strongs, the occurrence of the word father is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns. And throughout the Old Testament, which is what I was referring to, all the way up to the New Testament, the definition number 1 is not just prevalent, it's almost every single time.
Yeah. So let's see. So
So it doesn't matter where in the Old Testament I refer to. I can cite some exceptions, but the exceptions would be what? There's probably 30 exceptions and over probably more than 500 listings. So 30 out of about 500.
yeah. So I'm looking at this now through the Strong's Concordance as well. Yeah, I see all the different uses of father, and I out of all the types. So this is what they have listed here. So ancestors once, family once, fathers as in like biological father 571 times.
I was
And
off.
Father with a capital F 8 times.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's
Yeah,
the way it's normally read. I understand that.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm a little lost by the question itself. I'm missing the point of because you started out by saying that the fact that you interpret that as meaning God the Father instead of the slave's father. What
Right.
is it that fact prevents from happening to the slave, or what's the situation that causes with the slave? That's what I'm.
Well, in some strange situations, there's like the slave has a choice between father and master. In other times, if something goes haywire, they return to their father. So there's all these strange rules, and of course, much debate has been had about these, and much ink has been spilled. But if I take it in context of the entirety of the work, and I'm quoting the Bible when I say, "Call none the Father but God," and then it uses the word Father multiple times. What was it, 570 some odd times? If I take that very literally, then every occurrence of the word Father does not mean biological father at all.
Right, but what I'm asking is what is the what is the issue with regards to slavery, though? That's what you brought up to begin with about that.
Right.
Like, but how does it make the situation as far as a slave goes different that they're talking about God the Father
okay.
and not his own father?
I'm asserting that the word slave means theism.
Oh, okay. So I understand now. So what you're asserting is since they refer to God the Father in those verses, that they're not actually talking about an enslaved person. They're saying
They're not an indentured servitude of any kind. Yeah.
it's a slave to
any kind of servitude,
slave,
except for religious.
You're basically saying they're a slave to the faith, a slave
Right.
to obeying the Father.
Yeah, you're used to seeing those expressions. I'm a willing slave to God, etc., etc.
Right. But
how do you account for all the Levitical laws and elsewhere in the Bible where it talks specifically of how to handle your slaves and where you can get your slaves from, and the fact that you can sell your daughter into slavery and
well, let me put that in perspective. Let's say, for instance, that I was a Christian and I testify to someone who comes from a wholly atheistic family, like none of them believe in God at all, right? And I have conversation with this atheist, and I make them start to investigate, and eventually they come to the same decision I have, and they turn to theism from atheism. Okay, then I have made them a slave. They are a foreigner, and they had no father before that, in the sense that I'm using the word father in the context I'm using. So they have no father to return to. So thereby they are a slave of the father or of the master. And of course, master would mean the hero of the story and or Christ.
So At what point in this analogy then do you take me to the a doorway and pierce my ear with an owl? If I dedicate my life in servitude to God.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't think these things are, talking about body piercing any more than I think that the 144 being sealed in their forehead is a stamp on their forehead or something, or a tattoo or something. I think that it's talking about spiritual alignments. It's not talking about physical predispositions or present situations.
Right, and if I'm a Hebrew. And I come to God, I only really have to worship God for 6 years, and then I can go off and do whatever I want.
Worship God for 6 years. That's actually serve their master, and that's for the undecided, and that those might return to their father, which doesn't change anything I was saying.
So let me see.
It's just a matter of how they were saved and where their alignment lies.
Right, but Deuteronomy is a law for Hebrews. Okay, so
Right.
If you convert, so there's two ways to read, something like Deuteronomy, 15, where you can enslave a Hebrew for 6 years, and then on the seventh year, he no longer has to serve you, the Hebrew, that you let him go.
Year of Jubilee, right?
Yeah. So in your analogy, you bring someone to Christ, and then they serve you for 6 years, and on the seventh year, they don't have to serve Christ anymore.
Well, what I actually said was not serve me.
Well, that's what the text reads. Deuteronomy. Do you agree? Like Deuteronomy is addressed to to the Hebrews, Israelites. Sorry,
the Israelites. Yeah. Yes, I do. That it's talking about those who already assigned value to the idea of Yahweh, of Jehovah. Yeah.
Let me get in here real quick. Let me get in here just real quick. I just want to clarify something real quick. So you're saying, Richard, that there's a complete absence of any kind of slavery in the Bible, that it's all just an analogy?
Well, I don't think that slavery is a spiritual thing. I think it's a physical thing, although it can break a person's spirit if it's intense and bad enough. I suppose depends on who the master is.
But anywhere in the Bible it refers to slavery, it's talking about the kind of slavery you're talking about, being a slave to God.
Yeah, I believe it's a book about spirituality. I don't believe it's a book about physicality at all.
Okay, go ahead, Saka, or whoever else.
It's just an interesting, as long as you define it as something, and this is purely analogous to some type of spiritual slavery that you can dismiss, like just about any instance like this inside the Bible at all. Like that God never killed anybody. They died spiritually. Stuff like that. It feels really weird that that you can. It seems that you if you have this brush when you approach this, that there could be absolutely nothing wrong with this book, that you can't find anything that you would find morally reprehensible, because, well, if you do, you're just going to be you're just taking it in the wrong context, and what this and then you just come up with a different context for it. Like what's wrong with the literal understanding of this? Like if the entire book,
why are you saying that what I'm saying isn't the literal understanding of it?
Well, because it's not literal. Like I mean, literal would be like as it's written. Like we're talking about analogous language here, which is not literal.
Well, and the other thing is too, is like if you're claiming that they're all analogies, they're all metaphorical or analogous. Boy, in a lot of the scripture I've read, there's some pretty clumsy analogies in there. Then, I mean, because I'm having a tough time seeing.
Well, we get much of our structure of our language from the ancient Near East, from that same area of the world. And in fact, a lot of our sarcasm and our euphemistic language is based in those languages. And we today, Saka, you said, well, then it's all euphemistic, or I can just make it say whatever I want. But in fact, I can't any more than I could say that. And I'm sorry, I'm old and I'm outdated. But say in professional football, the Cowboys were playing against the Steelers, and I watched that Super Bowl, and there was a big difference between the ending scores, just a huge difference. I might say, well, the Cowboys got slaughtered. Now, did they actually get killed? No. Did they actually lose the game? Yes. So when I say that it's literal, I'm saying that, yes, they literally lost the game by a lot. But I used an expression to say that. I didn't say it, well, the final score was, and we just don't speak that way. We would never say, well, in common expression, unless we were trying to be technically accurate. We just wouldn't, talking to our friends, say something like, well, the score was exactly, the difference was exactly, blah, 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 blah.
Right, but the problem with that is that first off, that's not how we use the term literal. Then, like, there's we're not speaking literally at this point in time. Like, even in
it's figurative speech about something literal. Yes, that's what I'm trying to say.
No, okay, all right. So it is figurative speech. Okay. So 2 points. First off, I'm going to steal this from Korog because he is right. Ephesians 6:5, slaves, obey your earthly masters with deep respect and fear. Serve them sincerely as you would serve Christ. Well, there's an example of that's slaves serve their earthly masters. And specifically, not Christ, because you serve them as if you would serve Christ.
Yes, that's correct. It also says whoever's in charge, you're supposed to follow the local law, et cetera, and not get yourself in trouble. Yeah.
So those slaves have earthly masters. So there's no ambiguity there that what they're referring to is them serving Christ. That's just straight up. Well, there's people that own them, earthly masters.
Right. It says earthly masters there. I have no argument.
Okay, so.
But why does it say earthly masters there and not elsewhere where I am talking about? Sure, there's exceptions. There's like 30 of them. We pointed them out.
Right. So why would they say it there? Is because the context
is different.
Well, they're drawing a distinction between at that point in time.
Absolutely.
Right, but that doesn't lead into saying that in every other example where it's ambiguous that they're referring to God as the master, and
you're right. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
But here's the other problem. Okay, like this, I think that this one just gets to the roots of it. Like the problem with what you're doing when you bring in this notion that everything can be interpreted through this lens of analogous language is that what you've come out with this is that you come out with your own. 1 second, sorry. Here, thank you, buddy. Like you've come to a conclusion about what you think the text reads. But if it's analogous, we don't know what it's analogous to. In fact, we wouldn't have any access to that unless we knew completely what the writer's intentions were. Like you said, that this is common with our language. We can speak this way, especially when you're referring to God, who one of his aspects speaks solely in parables. Like with the case with Jesus there. So in which case you could never come to even though that this is your interpretation of it, I can dismiss it. I can say just as easily that the proper interpretation of that text is actually the recipe for a really good carrot cake, because as long as you understand what the words mean, the intentions of the author when they were putting out there, that it's analogous language that you fully don't understand, but if you did, you can come out with a really good carrot cake.
Why can't it be a bad carrot cake? I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm just saying that we don't know. Like you're now at this point in time, like you run into a bigger problem with this, which is fine. Like if you want to, say that this is your interpretation of it, that's fine. But if you lay out any type of room for ambiguity with the text, then you open up the fact that no one has access to the author's original intention at this point in time for this analogous language that's being used. In which case, you couldn't really derive any type of meaning from it at all.
Except consistency.
Well, no.
If it's consistent throughout the work, then there is a context. Then the context is applicable.
No, consistency only implies that some parts are literal, but you've ruled out the literalness from this. In fact, the entire book could be taken as figurative. So as a whole, you can't take a look at anything part of consistency. Consistency through the right lens, the whole thing's a cookbook.
Well,
It
like,
could be. It could be.
Go ahead, Cerberus. You haven't get on here. Did you want to get in?
yeah, I was gonna. I mean, can you hear me right now? Because it's not
Yes.
showing up. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, if the claim is the whole Bible is literal, like, then what does "thou shalt not kill" or "murder" mean?
Well, would you define the word kill and murder and the difference, and which one is accurate to the original text?
Well, I was giving you the option of picking whichever one you thought was accurate, because
Well,
I know to one
I
person it's
refer
different.
back to the most original text we have. I know we don't have signatures, but the most original we have. So it
Yeah.
actually reads, "Thou shalt not murder."
Okay,
I mean, we have to kill to eat.
but what does it
You have to
actually
kill
mean
a
now?
plant, you have to
Because
kill an animal. What's that?
but what does it actually mean then? I mean, if it's
It
if
means
it's not,
"Thou shalt not murder."
so that's literal.
Well, actually, it's a little bit deeper than that. If you really want to get into it, in my opinion, "Thou shalt not" can have two meanings. And I'm sorry to get. I'm not trying to avoid Sokka, but you said something. So, "Thou shalt not" can mean two different things. For instance, I could say, "Thou shalt not touch my pack of cigarettes; they're not yours." So I have a greater right to my belongings than you do. So that's a claimant of right, right? But I could say, "Thou shalt not jump into outer space using only your legs." Now, I haven't denied you anything. I haven't claimed anything. I haven't said that I have more of a right to something than you. But yet I used exactly the same words. All I did was made a statement that you're incapable of doing something using exactly the same phrase. So it depends on what you mean. It's entirely possible. Hold on. It's entirely possible that "thou shalt not murder" means you are not capable of murder. That is, you can't kill something, specifically a human being. Like there's no way that even if you ended their physical life, that you have actually ended them. It also could mean that.
Okay, but these are two instances of it being literal, though.
Okay. I never made the claim that all of it has to be figurative. I said it has to have continuous context.
Okay, well, I was under the. It seemed like we were working under the impression that the Bible was literal or not literal.
No, I said it has to be. There has to be a continuous context. I didn't say that it has to all be figurative or literal. I never said that.
I don't agree that it actually has to be completely consistent in its context, because it was my understanding that, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when you start talking about certain ancient languages like Greek, that the words that they use were the context was self-contained, right? So there wouldn't be the rest of the sentence giving context to the word as we do in English. Like, so if you have to talk about agape love, well, no matter what else is in that sentence, that's going to reference love from God specifically. So
right, like
I'm a bit confused when you start talking about consistency. Well, how is that being discerned here when the context is all self-contained?
Yeah, I would really agree with you, because in the story of David and Goliath, when Goliath looks at David as he approaches, he looks at him specifically with love and caring. And then 2 words after that is the word disdain, which is, hatred, and, well, you know what disdain means. So why is there that conflict right there? It wouldn't make sense in the way that Christians have been interpreting the story. So yes, some of the especially major words are very, very specific in that language, and are self-contained in context. Yes.
But again, like the problem that you're having here is that when you can take something like the Deuteronomy or Exodus, and you can change the entire context because you think that there's more of a consistency, within the Bible this way. Like for your own personal opinion, there's something that's consistent about this. So you're already drawing a conclusion through a almost literal understanding of the majority of the book, that this stuff, because it's not consistent with what you'd say when maybe like the nature of God or something like this, that therefore this has to be analogous. But the problem with this is that how do you know that the stuff that you're drawing consistency from isn't supposed to be analogous either? You're working back to purely this position where you're designing Christianity around a religion that you want to worship, rather than taking it at the at the face value of what is written. You might as well just Fisher Price build my own religion set right now, because that's what you've done.
Well, I think that's fair that you would say that. Now it's completely not true, but I can see where it's fair to say that. As I tried to explain, my broad brush that I would paint the Bible with is crutch for weak people who can't deal with life. That was my broad brush. Okay, so if I'm an example of pareidolia, then I'd like to know what the reward is, when the reward that I wanted was, lots of girlfriend, a beer on the weekends, lots of money, and to basically not follow any of it. That would have been the treat that I wanted. So when you postulate that what I've done is I've looked very hard through the text trying to find a way to justify it, that's simply just not the case. That's not what's happened at all. I was shown a way that I actually objected to, and it actually works, and it works consistently, and it works throughout the text, and it works throughout all texts.
I don't know if I'm just lagging behind here, but I'm still stuck on how does something being consistent in a text, how is that evidence that it's literal or metaphorical? Why couldn't it be either one?
Well, it could still be either one, or even broken up, as Dragnaut said. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be a combination, and in this case, it is a combination. But if I had a context that works throughout, and in fact works throughout all religions of an ancient origin throughout the world, then and these people did not have communication, they were separated by geography and time, then I would think that it probably has some value.
So now you're back to it's not all literal.
I never made the assertion that it's all literal or that it's all figurative. I never said that. Someone else said that.
Well, I thought at the beginning you said that it was literal.
I was talking about one
literal based on the figurative language that you were able to come up with a literal.
I was referring to one certain part of the text. We were talking about slavery and the word father.
Okie doke.
So are you claiming to have this key that allows you to, that gives you this consistency amongst all religions of the world?
Am I claiming to have a key? I'm a heavy equipment operator. I'm pretty good with a chainsaw. I know a bit about plumbing and fixing cars. I've never studied any of this stuff. It was just presented to me, this idea system to look at the text, the lens to look through. And so far I've been trying to disprove it. And that's why I'm here, is to have two men that I know that are highly you may be included in this, Cerberus. I don't know you, or Cerberus. I don't know you very well yet, but that's why I come on to things like this is so that people can point out to me logical problems with it. And if I'm wrong about this, they can correct me, but I'm purposely seeking people that are smarter than I am and more educated than I am to do that.
Yeah.
For instance, Dr. Josh.
I think what he was asking, though, Richard, was what is the common link that you referred to amongst all religions? You referred to some common link or something.
Yeah,
I think so. I think there is, yeah. I would call all religions worldwide of an ancient origin. That's discluding things like Jesus Christ scientist and Dianetics and all that stuff. Mormonism, it would disclude those. But I could say that every religion around the world, from what I can tell, unless I'm just completely wrong, is actually animism that is prophetic and cryptic. So cryptic, prophetic animism, I think.
It seemed like that's this being true, if it is true. It seemed like that was your reasoning for thinking that you understand the way you understand the Bible.
As I apply it, it actually works. I mean, it makes, for instance, I mean, I being an atheist, I was very well familiar with the inconsistencies in spiritual texts, especially being an American in the Bible. I used to quote them to people all the time, but it actually resolves all the conflicts, all the apparent what people think are contradictions are actually solved by this view. And I don't mean solved like Kent Hovind solved. I don't mean solved like Frank Turek solved. I mean actually solved.
Well, I think that when you say solved, though, I go back to what Saka was alluding to earlier. You are using such a liberal, broad interpretation that of course you can solve the problem, because you're literally reading something and you're coming up with almost an arbitrary interpretation, it seems to me.
I'm not saying that couldn't be done, and I'm not saying that's impossible in this case. I'm not saying that.
Well, how
this is why I'm here, is for people smarter than me to prove me wrong. That's why I'm here.
Uh-huh. So you don't have 100% confidence in your interpretation. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, I personally do, but that doesn't make me correct.
Right, and I think this is good that you acknowledge that, because I think a lot of people mistake having full confidence in a claim for, I guess, the veracity of the claim,
right,
being such that it is true. But I have to actually commend you on that. But I will say that, because it just sounds like, from my standpoint, that it's a case of eisegesis. It's kind of you interpreting the biblical text in a way that makes, I guess, it more amicable for you.
So if that were the case, about how long would that take me to do?
You could read any text, honestly, and interpret it in a matter of seconds, outside of the context, right?
Because, no, I mean something that actually works for the entirety of the text. How long do you think that should take?
I don't know. I am only familiar with my personal cognition, so I really can't tell you like the appropriate amount of time for that to happen.
Okay, well, in your own experience, you weren't born believing anything, I assume. And probably the earliest back you can remember is you believe that the people who were raising you are your parents and your siblings are your siblings. And
Sure.
You may not even have any proof to that. I mean, I've never been genetically tested to make sure I'm my mother's son. But I've made assumptions like that. So moving forward in time from those earliest memories, if I came to believe something at all, anything, let's say I came to believe that the multiplication tables were accurate, how long should it take me to, how much example should I need without any predetermined ideas about it before someone proved that to me to be right?
Well, I think analytical logic's a bit different, right? Because you can demonstrate analytical logic much easier, in my opinion, than other forms of logic.
You're right. It's not a very nuanced example. You're right.
Right. Yeah. So I think that would be actually a good example of, there are certain things that you can hold as a belief that requires little to no justification. In fact, if you're just working entirely on an internal justification, you can use fairly frivolous things, because the vast majority, if not all, the beliefs that we have, we gain passively. And I'm not talking about simple preferences like ice cream flavor, your favorite flavor or something like that, but the belief that, well, you know what, I think there's a God. You will passively gain either an acceptance or a denial, or just kind of being ambivalent about it without much thought, right? It is simply innate. But whether or not you change that position will be subject to whatever criteria you set for the standard, or that should say the burden of proof, to kind of move you into any particular direction, or just to maintain you, wherever you're at. And that can change from person to person.
Real quick. So, and now a few moments ago, you spoke of, well, how long would it take me? And I believe you used the word consistency, like how to interpret this and have a consistency. Well, once you started looking into it, and once you identified this perceived methodology that you came up with, then after
I didn't come up with it.
Well, no, but
I didn't.
Well, you did de facto come up with a methodology. I mean, you're claiming that you have a methodology to interpret these that shows a consistency throughout as a evidence of your claim. And what I'm saying is once you did, see this perceived methodology, then the consistency that you saw thereafter could simply have been confirmation bias.
Oh,
And
yeah, it certainly
Okay,
could be.
maybe there's no consistency at all in reality.
Yeah, right. I totally say it's very just. That's a fine thing to say. It's not the case at all, but it's an interesting thing to say. And yes, we're very, very subject to that. And yes, I have to really scrutinize myself and invite others to scrutinize me on this, that to make sure that it's not just confirmation bias.
Well,
Which is why I took Dr. Josh's advice and I wrote a 150-page, something around 50,000 word explanation of just the story of David and Goliath within this context.
Well, how is it that you can grant that premise, though, and in the very next breath say that you have 100% certitude that it's not the case?
It's called honesty. I'm convinced does not mean it's true. Everyone's convinced of things that aren't necessarily true.
Okay, so I got a couple questions. Like, one is what, I don't know if I missed it, but what is the actual method you're using? But I think more pertinently right now, it seems like you're acknowledging, okay, there's this potential flaw, but I am certain anyway. But you're wanting us to point out how you're wrong, but you're responding to us with, that could be the case, but I am sure otherwise.
Yes, that's right.
You see the issue with that?
No, actually, I don't. I think that's called intellectual honesty. Just like scientists say, well, this thing is a fact. That is, as best as we know it, it's true. Now, that's still tentative.
Wait, are you claiming this is like a scientific theory?
That's the way I'm looking at it. That's what I'm talking about.
I think
I'm trying to look at it analytically.
I think he's saying that he's holding this position provisionally, right? I think,
yes.
Okay, that's okay. I think I see what you're saying.
Of course, I think all of our positions are provisional,
How would you determine?
except for truly basic beliefs. But
I mean, if that's your methodology, how would you determine that it's better? If your way's better over just a strict literal reading of the Bible?
oh, well, that's easy enough to answer. Love, forgiveness, consistency, predictive power, applicability, also evidence where expected.
I don't see how your method gets more.
Well, we
of
haven't gotten that
than,
deep into it yet. That's true.
Yeah, well, I'm saying I don't see how your method does that any better than a literal reading.
Well, it's because I haven't explained it to you.
Well, I think that.
Why would you know that right now?
Well, that's what I'm slowly trying to get down.
Okay, so be specific, and we'll both be very careful, and we'll try to come to some kind of meeting of minds.
Okay, well, my main question is, what is your methodology specifically?
I summarized it in that it's cryptic prophetic animism, that is using the environment to explain something that would happen into the future. That is, that it has no historical value. That's not even the point. And yes, these sorts of things have happened on this earth. That's fine. That it wouldn't make any sense to use an example that doesn't make any sense, that that's completely unrealistic. So was there a King David and Jewry? Sure. Does it matter to me? Nope, not at all. So I think they're talking, what's being described as higher things. It's not talking about actual slavery. It's not talking about physical death so much. It's mentioned a few times, but only as a defeater of accomplishments. That this is a spiritual text talking about spiritual things, but all of them are. But that they're all in agreement and consistent, and that they all contain the same stories in ways that people it was presented to would give some kind of value to, so they might hang on to it, a little flavor of historicity to it, so they might think, well, maybe this book's worth hanging on to and worth considering, or maybe this story. But that's about it.
But I don't see how that's a method.
Well, I was
Right,
trying to
so-
be general because you were being general. If you were more specific, I'd be more specific.
Well, I said specifically, what's the method? Like I'm looking for
I think I just answered. Maybe I didn't.
Well, when I ask what's a method, I'm like, what are the specific rules I would need to use to interpret a text the way that you would interpret a text.
Oh, okay. I think that breaks down to probably about 5 things, I guess. I don't know. Talking about the future, not talking about the past, but using events of the past as examples. So that is, it's using our natural surroundings to teach a more important thing. That's why I say animism. Okay. It's cryptic. That is to say, it's intended to be not understood so that the people who assign it value can't do it themselves. Which is something that Shannon Q pointed out, that if prophecy doesn't happen, and if it does, the people did it. Well, that makes God, if any God exists, that makes God impotent. Okay. On the other hand, the flip side of that same coin is that if there was absolutely no information and everything were just shocking and everything was just new, well, then you haven't given the people that you supposedly care about any way to understand what's going on around them. You've given them no metric, and people like a metric. So, a little metric makes things easier for people, so that the prophecy is intended, though cryptic, to be decoded by the actions of our ancestry and in the moment. So, not historic, prophetic. Speaking of things we will see, not things we have seen, which is why it's of very little effect. You could say, well, 1/3 of the earth is Christian. That's fine. How many different denominations? So it's of almost no effect right now, if there is any truth in it. So it's prophetic, and in our past it's been ineffectual, and is intended to be interpreted by the events themselves.
It seems like there's a lot to this metric that you're using, but I'm not sure of an effective way to employ it. Right. So it sounds like it's I'll describe it multifaceted. It's a multifaceted way that you examine, what's going on here, but I struggle to find a way to actually take any bit of text and to interpret it the same way using that. So like if I tell you my metric for determining truth is to just see what comports with reality, well, that's very generic. Well, then if I say I go to Popeyes and I get some chicken bones and I throw them on the ground and the chicken bones tell me, well, I've not actually explained to you the mechanism by which I've determined truth. I've just told you different facets of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I don't know how to respond to that. Did it sound like a question? Or
well, that's kind of what I don't know about Sir, but that's kind of what I feel like when I'm hearing the way that you've kind of established your metric for determining the truth, as it were.
Yeah. I mean, I was waiting for a rule. I don't know if it's just me, but I didn't hear a rule. I heard that it was cryptic in such a way that people that give it meaning couldn't understand it.
Well, the rules are actually in the definitions. Father means God. Master means Jesus. Slave means already existent or new deist. That all of it is talking about a 7-year period, except for the first 5 days of the book of Genesis. That all of it is talking about a 7-year period, which is why everything's in 7 years, and Jubilee is 7 years, and that's why there's 7 plagues. And that's why there's, I could give you a whole bunch of rules for it.
Well, those sound like the conclusions that you've drawn from the metric, right? Those don't sound like what you would use to determine, because you could say that, well, when this word it means this and this word it means that. What did you use to determine that, right? I guess that's what we're trying to ask.
I didn't use anything to determine it.
Okay, that's what we're trying to figure out. It was just
presented to me, and as I tested, it works.
So at some point, a perspective, because I think that's a more apt term, a perspective was introduced to you in order to view this text. And from that perspective, you've gained insight as to what certain terms mean in or outside of whatever context may be the status quo, right? So what we're trying to do is to connect those dots. What within this perspective gave you the rules of the road that led you to those conclusions where this word means that and this means this?
Right. So that started with David and Goliath. The only story that I could remember from my childhood being that a Catholic priest tried to rape me when I was 12, so I left all churches and became an atheist. I think that's pretty good justification to become an atheist.
Well,
Even though my mom was very, very, very Catholic. So in Catholicism, you don't read your Bible; you just go on Sunday and listen, and then you're good for the week. And maybe you apologize to some priest through a screen or something like that. But basically, with it, Catholics don't normally, and we were a family that didn't study our Bible together, so I didn't know anything about it really. And mostly, I was playing hide and seek behind the pews that were unoccupied with my next older brother. So I grew up an atheist, and this was presented to me as an interpretation of David and Goliath, which is why I'm starting by doing a 4 peer review paper on David and Goliath. That's why I'm starting there.
I think, like, oh man. So actually, well, I'll skip over that. Okay. Like I said, I think that the biggest issue here, and I think it's like the one hurdle that we're not going to get over here, and we're just kind of dancing around the same point repeatedly here.
I'm not trying to. I'm sorry.
No, it's that your interpretation of the author's intention of the Bible is the problem. When I'll tell you the one thing that a biblical literalist has going for them, at least, is that biblical literalists can just point to the text and say this is what it means.
Right.
You know, it's right there. It's laid out as it's written. Is how it should be read, and it's wrong. Like, don't get me wrong. This is why you have people out there that believe that the world is 6,000 years old, and that that man was literally created from the dust. Like 6,000 years ago, and the first woman was created from his rib.
Dragnot pointed out it's the wrong composition, but yeah.
Yeah. Like this, but at least they could point to and be like, listen, this is the literal telling of it, and like, why would we take it any other way? And the problem
for
is,
one thing, it makes God a monster.
Well, I would agree that you have a very a weird moral compass if you think that a literal interpretation of the Bible paints a picture of a just, loving God.
It's very immoral, yes.
Especially if this is where you take your moral dictates from. You're going to run into problems with this. This is why you have people like that idiot last night, Sky-Out, saying, like, advocating for child brides and weird things like that because they can't get behind this terrible source as their moral compass. But the issue with what you're doing now is when you open it up to it's not just this particular verse that we're talking about here. This paints an overall picture of the Bible, and the problem with that. Well, if we're not to take this literally, if we're just supposed to take it figuratively, that this is all just analogous language, for meaning something else, is that you don't know where to start and stop with this. Is that
it's definitely complicated, no doubt.
Yeah, you could say that you could try to go for consistency, but consistency with what? More analogous language? Like I said, unless you knew the author's intent, that I could probably write out the Bible in such a way that we could probably describe a pretty good cookbook.
Well, let's talk about the author's intent, and let's talk about a little bit of logic that has to follow from that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Real quick before you go on, I just have one quick question. So, is the crucifixion an analogy?
Is the crucifixion an analogy? Well, that wouldn't save anybody in the moment, unless something that modern science couldn't do was done, proving that those who did it or whom did it was more advanced than we are.
Well, I mean, no,
they wouldn't prove anything.
The crucifixion, like when it says that God died for our sins,
yes.
that when Jesus came down.
Well, that depends on if you're a Hebrew or if you're a Gentile. That depends.
Right, but
as a Gentile, Jesus did not die for your sins. You're a Gentile.
Okay, but that's fine. But I'm saying, I'm positing that that's actually just analogous language. Is what that verse is really saying is, party hard, get shittered, recuperate for 3 days afterwards.
Mhm.
Like that's the intention of it. There's no need for salvation or anything like that.
Sure.
Those are just buzzwords to describe coming back from a really bad hangover.
Yeah,
Because
actually,
that's the author's
those are brand names of beers.
It could be brand names of beers. Who knows?
Sure.
But the point is that, like, if you paint things in analogous language, you could make anything say whatever you wanted to. So
that wouldn't
the
make
story-
that would take years to accomplish, and that would not be consistent. There would be problems with it.
What do you mean? I mean, it could just be like the story of the crucifixion is just a tale of a really bad, like, weekend binge drinking adventure.
If you really think that is possible,
language.
that is
Anything's
easily
possible with
accomplished,
analogous language.
I would say that
the-
try
a
to do
lot-
that with Moby Dick and come up with a different interpretation of Moby Dick,
Well, the difference
because
between
that's
difference-
non-emotional. That's a commonly known book, and
Well, the difference with that is that, to a certain extent, we actually know the author of Moby Dick. That's
sure, but you can throw that away in this
Right.
analogy,
But-
in this example.
which means that, like, even within that is that we actually have like examples of, like, discussions with Herman Melville on the book that
Mhm.
you could actually probably find some stories or reports about his what his intent with the book was.
Sure,
I'm
but
pretty
but if
not
me as an
just-
example,
not
we can throw all that away.
But not even just that. Like, with any author out there that doesn't, take a look at any book out there like that. Okay, sorry.
Oh, by the way, thanks for all your dad work. I think that's beautiful, man.
It's really hard to multitask this. Sorry, but yeah, the issue is that, like, take a look at any book report out there where people have to try to write up and try to interpret what the author's intent with these passages are. There's a lot of really cool things like that. Like, take a look at, like, the not the movie but the entire novel Fight Club, and then read into that and what the actual intention of Chuck Palahniuk was when he wrote that.
Mhm.
Like, and you'll get a couple of different, like, really good kind of write-ups of what this entire book is symbolism for, besides just a literal tale of some schizophrenic guy that likes beating himself up. Like, there's more to it than that. But like I said, the issue is that when you get into this realm of analogous language, is that you open up the floodgates that any person's idea that comes out there, that wants to represent their religion in that way, is free to do so with exactly the same amount of justification that you've put forward. So, like I said, is that we paint these, I'm sure you've heard this before, but for some reason,
Maybe.
most people's interpretations of God seem to reflect. People's interpretations of God seem to reflect really close to their own personalities. So if I was like an Andrew WK worshiping motherfucker and just wanted to go out and, like, get drunk and party all the time, then yeah, I could read into the story of the crucifixion and be like, this is obviously a description of a really bad bender, because I've had nights like that. I party hard so you didn't have to. I learned the lesson. And that's all the symbolism of it is. And we're not going to get beyond the realm of that, when we talk about analogous language, outside of just, like, painting it in the picture that we wanted to be interpreted as.
Right. That shows a desire to justify it. That's a
Yeah,
requirement.
I've certainly felt like
I
I
didn't
was
have
hanging-
any desire to justify it.
Yeah, I certainly felt like I was hanging from a cross after a night of drinking before.
Yeah, but all that requires that I wanted this, and in fact I did not.
But I mean, like, that's always a great. Okay, all right. We'll come back.
Either that, or I'm
We'll
a
come
big
back to that in a
liar.
second.
One
I
of
have
the
a
two.
parent. I'll be right back.
So when you say that implies that you wanted all this, I don't think that's necessarily true.
Well, why would I justify something I'm disinterested in? Do you go around justifying things you don't care about? I mean, no, I think most people don't.
Well, I don't know if caring is the same thing as wanting.
Okay, let me use both. Wanting, caring, giving a crap, thinking that it might be true, any of the above. I didn't qualify for any of that. I had no desire about it whatsoever.
I don't think that necessarily speaks to anything, though. I mean, the fact that you didn't care about any of this, or that you weren't, didn't have some, preconceived notion going in,
Well, no,
I
it
don't-
eliminates the idea of pareidolia. In fact, there was no reward for me. I wasn't looking for a reward. I was not repeating a behavior or justifying something for a reward. There was no reward.
I don't
In fact, it was more of a punishment in my view.
I don't think there's a reward aspect to pareidolia. Like it is simply something that happens. That's like saying that there's some type of reward for me not observing the color blue, right? Or me, not having any peripheral vision. Like there's just it's something that you just do innately that is a physiological process of your body, right? Your eyes and your brain and everything connected in between.
Well, the whole idea behind the operator training is to show that, in fact, what we're talking about in biases, personal biases, is that there is an action, or in our case, a thought that creates a reward, and we can have false understanding about what that action or thought is that's creating that reward. That's the basis of the entirety of the idea, from what I understand.
Well, if you get a shot of dopamine every time you back a claim, then that would be
Sure.
fairly unique. But I don't think that this would be the case. Like, there's plenty of things that I can entertain and defend and not really care about. But I don't think there's a real reward in it other than me doing it just to pass time. But if I
Right.
actually receive a shot of dopamine, like I just use as an example, like when certain people receive praise on social media, we know that there is an actual physiological link to pleasure sensors with that
Sure.
action.
Sure.
But I'm not sure if that's the same for every person, right? But it's for I think the purposes of this conversation, it is simply trying to suss out outside of just the feeling that it's intuitive, what type of metric could be established for others to come to these conclusions. And so far, what I've been able to kind of gather is that there's simply a perspective that you have gained from others, and that from this perspective you have sort of used that as a lens to kind of color your reading of the Bible. And so
That's
now
fair.
That we're kind of in the stages of justifying it. I think that it was already accepted, and so now you have to work backwards to try and find.
What do you mean it was already accepted? What does that mean?
Well, when you gain the perspective that you're using now, right?
Mhm.
It was intuitive to you, so you innately just sort of absorbed it into your being.
No, that's incorrect. As I've explained or tried to
Okay.
explain several times, my intuition was that it's a bunch of crap.
Right,
That
but
was
that
my
changed,
intuition.
that changed during this
It
process.
changed because I saw things that are provable, disprovable, falsifiable, that were, when I tried to falsify them, were actually true. And I think I should just accept things based on evidence.
Well, when you say falsifying, and a little while ago you talked about you tested things and saw that they were true. Can you
Sure.
explain to us what testing procedure you used?
Well, okay, I'll give you a real quick, small example. What's the chemistry of the moon Io?
I'd have to look that up.
I didn't know either. What's the outer atmosphere of the planet Jupiter?
I'm pretty sure we could find out.
We can find out, but I didn't know, just like you don't know right now. I mean,
Right.
I went and looked it up, which makes me look enabled, and I'm sorry that I have to look these things up to explain them. But I was innocent of these things. I didn't know that. In fact, I thought we called the moon because it was the only one. I thought that we were the only planet in the solar system with a moon, and
No,
I
our-
didn't learn different until I saw this interpretation. And then when I looked, there are actually moons over other planets, which surprised me. And that one of those moons that's described in the text under this interpretation, I admit, under this interpretation is referring to the moon Io, and it has the coloration, the general distance, the comparative size, the location. It has all of that correct. And it also indicates in context through the whole thing within this interpretation that it also says that the moon Io is flammable, and so does the outer atmosphere of Jupiter. Now, I didn't know those things, and few people do, I think, unless you're a specialist. But it turns out that it's absolutely factual.
Yeah,
And
so,
that is one example of many.
so I because I think this is kind of what the disconnect is, because you said that you didn't you did accept it. Maybe I missed that, but I've still not really heard the connection of what is the mechanism that you use to determine that this perspective is right, other than you utilizing it. Because
Yeah,
I can,
see, because what you just talked about for the past few moments, Richard, was that
Sure.
you read something and then you confirmed that it in fact was true. That's not a testing, but you said before you tested things like that.
What do you consider a test?
okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. Okay, so now we're getting somewhere, because what I'm seeing is that the lens is put on from this perspective, and then you gain truth. There are certain facts about the world that you ascertain, whether it's from the Bible, whether it's anything else.
Mhm.
So if I say that I'm going to test a hypothesis, right?
Right.
Then there is going to be a series of actions that I conduct that
Mhm.
will help me draw out the conclusion. Now, in an actual scientific test, what you are going to try to do is to invalidate that hypothesis. And that's something that
Mhm.
people kind of mix up. You're going to try to do your best to debunk yourself. And when you
Absolutely.
fail to debunk yourself, that's how you're supposed to come to truth. Now, that's based on the strength
But it's
of
still tentative.
it's still everything provisional, but that's based on the strength and the type of experiment that you conduct. Now,
Sure.
it really depends on a bunch of parameters that I don't want to get into. But when we're talking about an interpretation that deals with linguistics, right? That's something that's a bit more well grounded. So we can look at other pieces of literature from whatever this language is, and to see how it's used in other works, right?
Mhm.
And we can see much about that culture, about how much figurative language that they use. Some maybe they're very literal. So
Mhm.
if this technique can be utilized, let's say, on another piece of literature from the time. So if we're talking about Koine
Mhm.
Greek,
I doubt it.
which is like, well, that would be a good test, right? Because if this technique is effective, you should be able to take other works in Koine Greek and
No,
utilize it the
actually,
same way.
I already mentioned what I think it applies to, and that it's universal, and that it only applies to religions of an ancient origin, whether they were separated by geography and time or not. I already said that.
Okay, I guess so they're universal, but they're only applicable to
It's
relig-
only it works on religious texts. It
Okay,
doesn't work anywhere else.
well, I don't think it'd be universal then. That would be the
It's
opposite.
universal to religious
Okay,
texts.
universal to religious text.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's a qualifier. Sure.
so why would this only be applicable to religious text then, if the language Koine Greek was utilized in works other than religious works?
Because those works wouldn't be prophetic.
Okay, so
Those are
the
just, I mean, they're history, they're whatever.
okay, so now
Poetry.
now how we determine that something is prophetic, right?
Mhm.
That would need its own, I guess, metric
Mhm.
in order to determine. So that's another variable that we've now thrown in here. So how do we determine whether even it being prophetic is something that should be used to measure it?
Sure.
So what
Sure.
is the
Yeah, no, that's a
justification for
great
that?
point. And by the way, I think that everything you're saying is well in line with mainstream um, um, verification of just about anything. By the way, I think you're doing a great job of explaining that to myself and anyone else. Um, so, how would we know? Well, just like if we should think that there's a transitional form between, say, coelacanth, the walking lungfish, and say some kind of a more amphibious creature, more like a lizard, but not a lizard yet. And we look in certain part of the earth, we might find Tiktaalik, right?
Sure. We'll go with
Okay, and
that.
we did.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's predictive power. That's saying, well, if A and B, then C. So we found C. So if I found C, I should think that is some kind of confirmation. Yes.
Okay, so it being prophetic that's a synonym for predictability, predictive power.
Predictive power. Yes.
Okay. All right. So now we're getting somewhere. All right. So, in the I guess in the realm of religious text,
I did assume that. I'm sorry.
um, how do we relate that the predictability in religious texts. That I guess that's the connection that I need.
Well, I have to say that until these the major events start happening, I don't have any way to do that.
Okay, so
Okay.
right, I think that's a big issue though, because if you're using
Sure.
this as a metric to determine
Right.
the truth of these religious texts, and
Mhm.
they have yet to actually show that it's even valid,
Okay.
how is that
I
being
made a
used
qualified
contemporary?
statement. You just made a universal statement. That's not what I said.
Okay,
What
so
I said is the major events
major events.
have not begun to happen. I didn't say none of it has happened or that none of it is confirmable. I didn't say that.
Okay, so the difference between the major events and the minor events, that's
Mhm.
another layer now. Okay, so
Mhm.
we're about 3 layers deep in with this one
It gets
aspect
worse.
to this. So but I think
Yeah.
but you kind of see the problem. The more layers you
No.
add to this, right, the more it becomes specified to this very, very small realm of
Yes.
things that it can confirm. Because now if it's only the things that are major events, right, so how does that take away or add to the ability of this particular aspect, right? This
Well,
predictability. How does that add or take away from it by not having the major events verified?
well, in no way did I say that this is good advice for a pregnant woman on what food she should eat. I said it's very specific, and it is. It's extremely specific. Although it's universal throughout spiritual texts around the planet, it is extremely specific. But that consistency only lends to it being accurate. I don't see that as being a problem whatsoever. That if it were very, very generalized, then anyone would say, well, that happens every fifth Tuesday. I go, well, yeah, it happens every fifth Tuesday. Well, that's proof of nothing. So that's kind of a catch-22. If I say it's super specific and we say, oh, it's too specific, but then if I said, oh, there's this general thing, you'd say, well, that's too general.
Well, sure, we can have a scale on whether or not something is truly prophetic, right? Just so
Mhm.
general things like there will be wars, there will be scoffers. Those have precedent.
That's
So
super general, yeah.
that's super general. So if we're
Yeah,
talking about
anyone can say
things,
that about
Sure.
anything.
sure. So then we shouldn't even be including things that are minor prophetic events, because those would be in that category of things that have precedent. So
Sure, that's why I
so
don't refer to those.
right. So if the predictive power of these the prophetic aspect of this perspective is
Sure.
to be used, their power is going to lie in their ability to predict major events, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then we have yet to actually show that they have that type of predictive power, correct?
Oh, sure. I'm definitely just presenting an idea that, I mean, I have evidence to it. I would share the evidence to it. I think the evidence is extremely persuasive. Not everyone would, but there is evidence to this effect. Yes, to support the case.
Okay, so that's something that I would need to be presented, because as
Sure.
of now, it seems like these major events that they're supposed to predict and to, I guess, supply the prophetic power
Well, I would
needs
give an
to be
example.
substantiated. Sure.
Okay, so let's say, for instance, I'm going to present something you've probably never heard in your life, and I apologize for that. And I'm going to have to ask you to just really free up and forget that I'm talking about Christianity.
Okay. Just for
forget
argumento's
about
sake, sure,
Christianity.
sure.
Okay, so just within a biblical criticism within this interpretation, I'm going to say that the King Saul within the story of David and Goliath actually represents the son. And no, I'm not doing wordplay. I'm not. The literal translation of Saul is asked, past tense. But then David is the planet Mercury, and then Abinadab, Eliab, and Shammah are Venus, Earth, and Mars. Then the two armies are the asteroid belts. And then the fifth one out is Jupiter, the planet Jupiter, which is represented by Goliath, the giant of Gath with the stone in his forehead. That is the great red eye in Jupiter. And his armament actually matches the moons over Jupiter in general description. And then if I apply the story of David and Goliath to those stellar bodies, what you end up with is as a first event, you end up with an evil spirit. That is something we would perceive as evil. An evil spirit coming out of Saul, that would be the sun. And as a first event in the prophecy is a quaking of the earth. Well, in science today, we can show that David plays the harp, that planetary alignments do happen, that planetary alignments, certain gravitational fields and certain alignments encourage solar ejecta. We know that's true now. That solar ejecta hitting the Earth can be very, very catastrophic, especially if the poles are near flipping, which many people believe that they are. So you can have a very catastrophic event on this Earth caused by a solar coronal mass ejection, CME, or what we would call, is actually a plasma
prominence.
discharge. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'm familiar with prominence. Yeah. So
Okay.
Within this, and I don't know if Serb and Sokka have been paying attention. It sounds like you are using, you're actually begging the question with this particular example.
Oh, I know it sounds like that.
So that because you're utilizing the very thing that we're trying to validate here. Like one of your premises here is that this particular aspect here, the predictive power, lends credence to the perspective. Well, you just defer back to the perspective in question in order to provide validation for this thing. So
right. So
yeah.
unless it's consistent, broad spectrum, and absolutely every aspect of the story works in reality, then I would totally throw it away. Because at some point, I have to say that it's not really begging the question. At some point.
Well, begging the question simply means that your conclusion is within your premises.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, if you can derive your conclusion from a single premise, then it's begging the question. And I think that you can derive your conclusion from the first premise of your argument. So technically, it's begging the question. But I mean, it's just not really a convincing argument.
Well, teach me what I'm doing wrong then, and I'll fix it.
Well, before we get there, you saying this has predictive capability. I mean,
sure.
Well, what prediction? I mean, assuming that you've read on this, and maybe you won't consider yourself an expert, but at least more of an expert than we are in here on this interpretation.
Well, after I saw the interpretation, I did go and look and see if it was plausible in reality.
Yeah, but do you have a prediction for us?
Well, there's been several. Like, for instance, I was ignorant of the chemistry of the moon Io and the outer atmosphere and the 73% liquid metallic hydrogen mass of Jupiter being flammable. And the story is actually talking about Jupiter being lit on fire. I wouldn't have known that. But I saw that in the story, and I went and see if it was plausible, and it is.
But it's not really a prediction because we know the stuff about Jupiter.
No, NASA knows maybe, but I certainly didn't. So for me, it's not. It's not just confirming what I think. I didn't think anything. I didn't know these things even were in those predispositions. I had no idea. I'm a heavy equipment operator. I'm pretty good with a chainsaw, but I didn't know anything about astronomy.
Okay, I guess I should ask, where in the Bible does it? I mean, I know you already listed like what represents Jupiter, but where is all this information about Jupiter in the book?
It's in the story of David and Goliath.
So in the story of David and Goliath, it gives you the atmosphere
of
Jupiter.
Page and a half, 2 pages. No, it just says that Jupiter is going to go through a great change that we can see from here.
And the great change is the Jupiter is Goliath, right? I'm not freaking.
Well, the name Goliath, the Philistine Goliath of Gath, literally means to be exposed in exile during the winepress. That's what it literally means. That's the most literal translation of that.
I mean, how do you get from
a rolling migratory who's to be exposed in exile? That means at some distance during the great winepress. That's a term that means end times.
I'm not seeing how you're getting the information about Jupiter or really end times out of that.
Okay, well, if you went and did all the translations as I have, I think it becomes really clear. I mean, I'm giving a little tiny example. This is a flash in a pan. This is no good of an explanation at all, actually.
Okay, well, now I'll put it this way: is there a prediction in there of something that humans don't know yet?
Sure. I'll give you, for instance, I started looking for something to block the hands and head of Dagon, which is now called Draco, was Poseidon in between those two, which is a constellation. It's 3 stars very close to the North Star that are almost a perfect triangle. To the human eye, they look perfect. And something to block the view of those. Okay. So I started looking for that in 2013, and NASA didn't find it till 2017. And I told several people that that was in the text.
You found something to block?
Yeah,
Draco?
something that's going to block our view of those particular 3 stars and only those 3 stars. Yes.
Yeah, but that's plausible to happen anyway. Like,
Do you know how many directions are in a sphere, sir?
it depends on how you want to parse the sphere.
Okay. So you know that it's infinite.
Well, I think that he's pointing out that if we're talking about predictability, if we're talking about predictive power and things that are truly prophetic, the major category are going to be things that are unprecedented and stars
Yeah,
blocking
this
out.
is unprecedented.
So a celestial body blocking out another celestial body?
No, that's too general. I was very, very specific.
Well, that's we're talking about 2 celestial bodies, one obscuring the other.
Isn't this the same thing as what's the chances of that sperm hitting that egg creating me fallacy? This is the same thing. The chances of you happening was probably about 40%. You might have looked different, because a different sperm hit that egg, but still it was pretty much gonna happen. I mean, pretty good chance of pregnancy without protection. I think that's a fallacy. What I said was a stellar body, a traveling stellar object, would block our view of those 3 particular stars. That's what I said.
So I absolutely agree that like something like a comet, right, blocking or obscuring other celestial bodies that are in an orbit is a scenario that would be low, absolutely low. I don't deny for a second, but is it unprecedented?
Actually,
That's
it is
the question.
unprecedented because of the size of it, how far away it's sublimating.
So that's never happened before. We've
the
never had.
exact trajectory. As far as we know, it's never happened before. It couldn't happen twice, as far as we know.
Okay, so
And there's a name for. I looked up the name for it. I've memorized the name. Not that I'm good at memorizing.
of the
things.
phenomenon of the particular
The particular object.
object. Okay, so. So that's what I'm kind of curious about. If it's never happened before, then we have no record of it. How would we know that that's actually going to happen, right? How would we?
Because we can see its trajectory.
We can see its trajectory. Okay.
Right. We know it's going to happen. It still hasn't happened. We can still see those 3 stars with the naked eye. The comet C 2017 K2 Pan-STARRS is not yet close enough, but it's going to pierce our solar system, and NASA predicts that it'll loop under the sun and then head out at about a 45 out of our solar system again.
Okay. Well, just for argument though, let's roll with that. It's unprecedented, and that this methodology helps to somehow discern facts like that. That would seem like
Sure.
it's more dealing with astronomy and mathematics than
Stuff I'm
anything else.
unfamiliar with. Stuff
Yeah.
I'm bad at, actually.
Well, I mean, and that's fair, right? But that's going into, I think, a bit of a different area, because you can calculate that. Like that, I can calculate the trajectory. We can do some vector analysis and do that. But how that lends credence to this perspective is kind of what I think.
Well, because
we
it's
observe
like a
others.
bazillion to 1 chance that I could be looking for something for 5 years and talk to people about it, referring to an ancient spiritual text and saying the ancient spiritual text has that in it, and then it actually is happening right now.
Okay, you know what? I will grant, for the sake of argument. Actually, not even for the sake of argument. I think that's a pretty cool prediction.
Yeah.
If that was to come true, like that would be, potentially good argument for prophecy, which is fine.
Okay.
But I guess that the question then, that how would we differentiate? I mean, how do we know that this also wasn't just complete luck that you got it right?
Oh, it definitely could be.
Okay.
Before we
That's always a
get
possibility.
that, I don't even think it's a good prediction, right?
Okay.
I mean, I don't know, let's pick a star.
I mean-
Let's just say the Northern Star, right? I could predict vaguely that the Northern Star will be blocked by an object, right?
Mhm.
And then a few thousand years later, it happens. I'm not prophetic.
Well, I mean,
I'm just
how,
picking something that is plausible to happen given enough time.
Sure.
well, actually, also, how long does that have to be blocked for, too? I mean, is there...
Well,
Just-
you don't have to go
all
that
the
far,
text
but
says. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna say if you're going to make a prediction like that, right? Something that is plausible to happen given enough time.
Sure.
In order for I think in order for it to be reasonably considered prophetic,
Right.
it would have to be more specific than that. It would have to be maybe not even to like the day or the hour, but like to the
Sure.
month.
Sure.
Like does it
But, I
have
mean,
that?
That's pretty
the-
fair.
the-
But could you
the also
replace that
thing-
with the number of occurrences? Let's
But-
say
but-
there
but
was
the-
20 in a row, and all 20 out of 20 happened.
Oh,
Would that
the
be
other
about
thing...
the
Yeah,
same for you?
that would be better. Like if it was 20 in a row, like consistent,
Okay.
like one
That's
right
fair.
after the other.
Yeah, but also in your prophecy, doesn't this bring? Didn't you say that was also like in the translation, a sign of the end times as well, or was that for a different prophecy?
No, it's all the same thing. It's all part of the same thing.
Okay, so if there's something obstructs 3 stars and the world ends, I owe you a Coke.
Oh, great. But if it's okay with you, I prefer Pepsi, and I don't want any reward at all. Actually,
Actually, if that
If this is
happens,
true.
if that happens, I'd rather that you owe me like a line of Coke.
a line of
geez.
Coke. Ha 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 ha.
Um,
You don't still do that stuff, do you, John? Don't talk about it. Never mind.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to ask that.
I don't, and I just broke it. I just broke a rule of the channel by talking about an illicit substance. My apologies.
Ooh, you're fired, man.
so I think like, well, this is interesting. Like some of the stuff. I do have some other questions. So because I am actually a little curious about your deconversion story.
Okay.
Because you
Away,
said
bro.
that you said that you were an avid anti-theist.
Yeah. You know I got all the
And-
respect from the world for you guys. You know that, right?
Oh yeah, well, thank you.
We're
You've
not.
impressed
We're
me,
not
you
all.
really
We're
have.
not all. We're not all anti-theists here, though.
Thank you
I'm
for your
pretty-
support.
I'm pretty anti-theist myself right now.
But so you said that you recognize as an atheist before. Okay.
Sure.
So now when you recognize as an atheist, you believe that no gods existed.
Right.
Was there a particular argument that you kind of went towards where it's just like, the like divine hiddenness or problem of evil or
I liked Problem of Evil and Historicity myself. That's what I always liked.
just the historicity, the problems of the historicity.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fair enough. And now, now this was obviously solved for you because the the historicity thing. Because I mean,
Because I
if you
think
take
it's not
these-
historical now.
right, if you take the entire book as an analogous, you don't have to take it as a historical text at all. Problem of evil. You just don't view it as a problem anymore, or you?
Well, would you please tell me what perfect life means?
Perfect life.
Yeah,
Oh,
tell me what
geez.
is a perfect life. What does that mean?
I mean, are we talking about like that's she's like a life worth lived, like the type thing?
No. I mean, what is the perfect life? What does that mean? Like, give me an example of aspects of a life that would be perfect.
I mean, it's like asking what a perfect couch is. Like
No, it's
I
not.
couldn't begin to describe what a perfect couch is
Well,
either.
this is much harder than what's a perfect couch.
I know.
I'm
that's
even
what
asking you outside of your opinion. I'm asking you for a standard of what life would be perfect. I think it's impossible to answer.
I don't even know if a perfect life is something that's even
Well-
even something that's we can talk about.
Sam
Like
Harris
the-
talks about the no harm principle and what benefits our species the most and minimizes the amount of suffering to our species is a description of the best society, the best life. And that's pretty good.
Yeah,
I think he
Sam-
thought that out pretty good, but there's problems with it. Even he points out.
Oh yeah,
What
there's
if
tons of
my
problems
idea
with
of
Sam Harris said.
happiness is farming, but you've perfected society to the point there's no farms, it's all machine done. But I can't be happy unless I'm a farmer digging my hands in the soil. What then? Well, I can't be happy. So what is truly good for an individual is up to the individual and their personal tastes, their own opinions. Okay? So
Well, I would
I'm
agree that
addressing-
I would agree that there's different values that we do hold.
Sure.
the
Okay, so
through the standard though that the Sam Harris puts out there when he talks about a perfect life is that I don't think that he is referring to like an actual like tangible like life that you can look at and say like, well, this is the perfect example of existence or anything like
right.
that, or this is the perfect example of
Well, he gave
a
generalities.
life
I
form.
stated them.
Yeah, what he said is that there's life experiences, okay, and that life experiences can be measured on a scale, and that it doesn't take a like a huge like amount of like stretch to imagine an example of a bad life compared to a life of a good life. You know,
I
these
don't
things.
agree with
These
him
things,
on that. I absolutely do not agree.
you don't agree that
And I
there are
think by the
some.
end of this conversation, you won't agree with him either.
Well, I don't agree with that. I'm just trying to see whether or not to like it's not that I okay, it's not that I necessarily disagree with him. I just think that my biggest problem with Sam Harris and the moral landscape is that when it comes to describing something like an action as maximizing well-being or decreasing suffering,
Mhm.
is that I think suffering is probably a little bit easier to go with, but well-being is such a almost vacuous topic to describe.
Sure.
If it's
So
something,
individual.
yeah. So there's obviously going to be some problems with
Okay,
that.
so I would cite an example. One of the reasons that I feel somewhat free to speak my mind to Dragnot is I know that he was in the Army and I've informed him I was too. Okay, so we can sit here and joke and say, oh, yeah, drill sergeants are jerks, but they really laugh at the end of the day.
And
We can say
yeah,
things like that. And you've been in the military, or you
oh, I
are in
still
the military presently.
still am. Yeah.
I correct myself. Thank you. So because of these commonalities of experience, there are ties of association that are normally recognized within our society. For instance, two pregnant women free to talk about peeing themselves. Okay, so what is the perfect life? Well, in the case of a mom, it's having been pregnant and having been troubled by it and going through all the pangs of birth and child rearing and everything else. And so that's perfect. Well, I just said that giving birth, which is very, very difficult and uncomfortable, at least, not that I can understand that really, is perfect. Well, wait a minute. I thought it was painful. Yeah, it's painful. Is that perfect? Quite possibly. So when we talk about the problem of evil, we're saying, well, this is the best case scenario and we should avoid B. Well, that's great, but how the hell would you know that? I don't know that. I'd like to know how somebody knows that, because it's my negative experiences that make me brothers with someone. It's not the positive things. It's all the negative things. And I love people, and I feel free to speak about certain subjects with certain people because of those negative experiences, not because of the positive ones.
Yeah. So
So I don't think the problem of evil is a problem.
well, I mean, there still is a problem of evil because let's take a look at suffering as a metric. Okay,
Mhm.
is that there are types of like of suffering out there that just has no positives at all. You know,
Like
things
what?
that would. Well, let's take a look at natural disasters. Okay,
Okay.
natural disasters come around and
You ever
kills
been in
your.
a natural disaster?
I have.
Okay, great. Can you tell me what people did, including yourself, during or directly after?
We were there providing aid.
No, what did you do? What did the people do? Not what did aid providers do? That's not what I asked.
Oh, that's the capacity that I was there. Like you.
Oh, you were in aid.
That.
My mistake. My mistake. Okay, so what did you do?
Well, we rebuilt structures. We organized essentially, well, like let's call them camps, and we handed out food and resources to people.
So that was probably a big pain in your butt. You probably hated the whole thing, and you probably hated to help people, and you probably saw them with the certain looks on their face, and you thought, "Wow, that guy looks really happy, and I can't figure out why."
No, I was.
So you probably felt good about it, actually.
That felt good about it? No,
Sure.
no, it was
No?
it was like my actions. Like I was happy that I was in a position that I can do something. But overall, like and people were happy that we were there. But like
Mhm.
overall, like the doesn't take away the intense amount of suffering that people
Oh
went
yeah, I
through.
know.
The lives that were lost, stuff like that. Like
Sure, that's hard.
it's there was the fact that there's some good that that can come out of it after the fact
Thank
doesn't
you.
take away from the fact that there was this intense amount of suffering to begin with. And even if the people that we provided aid to were thankful, that does nothing
Sure.
for the people that died and the
Right.
suffering that they had to go through.
Absolutely.
So I mean, like the natural evils, like for example, like like any type of like natural disasters, things like that. Like there's, I don't understand how you can any type of God existing that can be described in any type of benevolent means could allow for any natural disasters to happen, because
Well, that's a really Christian doctrinal view you just expressed there.
no, I'm not just trying to say like the like a Christian viewpoint here. I'm saying that anything that anybody that believes that there exists a type of God that
Right.
possesses like a creation God,
Mhm.
that has a certain appreciation or admiration for his creation,
Mhm.
to for them to allow natural evils to occur,
Mhm.
if they have the power to stop it, would
Mhm.
make them a monster.
Oh, it would if it wasn't the best thing for us.
I mean,
Well,
it's
see,
kind of like a kid who builds a model car only to take it out in the backyard and blow it up with M80s.
I think that's not an accurate comparison at all.
But you said
Because there would be no purpose but destruction in that, because the model car is not going to rebuild itself. It's not going to talk about how the destruction was with other model cars that were destroyed. It's not going to build relationships. It's not going to be supportive of others. It's not going to gain understanding. So I don't know if that's the best example.
yeah, people won't have to build new relationships if you didn't kill off the relationships that they had before. They could just build those relationships without that amount of suffering.
I'd suggest that as well. Sure.
It's like this weird kind of idea. Like this is actually a problem with the Christian worldview.
Mhm.
And even the one that you just espoused right here
Mhm.
is that you have to sit in this chair, you have to sit in this position, and you have to say that an omnibenevolent, omnipotent, omniscient God that is knowledgeable of all moral facts, that has power to lead things in the way that could be the best possible world,
Mhm.
it is going to in fact act in such a way that's going to lead to the best possible world.
Okay, that was a huge assumption. If you don't
No,
too
but
many topics at a time, I'll forget.
Okay, no, but the issue with the statement that you said was that, well, we don't know if this leads to the best possible outcome.
Right.
Okay, now let's say, for example, that is the case. Okay, it is the case that an omniscient, omnibenevolent, omnibenevolent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, omnipotent God does exist.
Mhm.
Okay, and that when he or she created the universe,
Mhm.
they had all knowledge of this universe, this reality, as well as the infinite amount of possible realities that they could have created. And because they're omnipotent and omnibenevolent and omniscient.
I love you. Do you know how many Christian assumptions you're making about me?
No, hold on. Just hear me out. Okay. Is that even if they're, if this omnipotent, omnibenevolent, omniscient God existed with knowledge of all possible realities out there, is that this God would pick the best possible reality for us, the one that, because he's omnibenevolent, maybe in some weird, sick, twisted way, the world that the universe that brings about like the greatest amount of well-being for everyone is the one where natural evils do occur. That's fine. Okay, so let's just say that's the case. Now, if you are of the position that natural evils are not a problem because they bring on a greater good in the end, was that a position that you hold?
Well, first, I'd like to address everything else you said before that.
Okay.
Would it be reasonable? Hold on. I mean, I'm enjoying this, but man, give me a chance to because you're saying so many things, I'm not going to be able to keep track. I'm losing track. I'm not that smart, bro. So you said omnibenevolent and omnipotent would choose. That's part of what you said. And to create a perfect or possibly perfect worlds or perfect universe. Okay, that's a huge Christian doctrinal assumption.
No,
Okay.
hold on. It's not.
Why is it you
because-
spoke for 3.5 minutes, but I can't finish 1 minute? Why is that?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that, like, on that point, it's wrong. That's why. Like, just by pure definition, if there was an omnibenevolent, omniscient,
Yes, but you're making assumptions. I'm trying to point out to you, you've made assumptions that I don't assign value to. Can I finish?
What assumption did I make? Did I bring up?
I'm trying to tell you, Sokka.
Go ahead, Richard.
Goodness, man. Okay, so could an omnibenevolent, omnipotent God make the following statement? Two statements. I would that all be saved. All are not saved. Now I'm quoting the Bible there. Okay, so it can't be both. All right, so first of all, the Bible itself defeats that doctrinal idea that God would if he could. Not true.
Then
All
he's
right?
not. Then he's either not omnibenevolent, not omniscient, or not
yes.
omnipotent.
That's right.
Okay.
Okay, but
So-
I'm not assigning value to those Christian doctrinal ideas, and that's the idea set you're asking me the question in.
Right. So in order for you to get around the problem of evil, which one of those is God not?
Okay, I think that also is not accurate. I think what the text is actually saying is it's completely benevolent and within his power to leave it exactly as it is, that this is the perfect world. And here is why I think it is the perfect world. Aside from the diversity in adversity causing brotherhood and sisterhood, aside from that what is actually mentioned throughout the work also is a multiplicity of Earth's lowercase EARTH, not uppercase, not a proper noun, more like oak, which should not be capitalized. Now, out of pride and our misunderstanding of these things, we've capitalized it. And I know that scholarship normally looks at it that way. That's fine. I think that's a really small view. But that we, in our perfection, have empathy for not only those that are in our immediate friend and family group, but even beyond that, great empathy and understanding of future occurrences of people having a life, say, for instance, very much like yours.
Look, you said that
So-
this is the perfect world, but if you can imagine a possible world with one less child that has cancer, well, then that would be a more perfect world. So,
According to you, but not according to me.
Okay, so here's the problem again, because now we've gone full circle back to the main point, which is that you believe that this is a perfect world, complete
Yes,
with
I
all
do.
natural evils. Okay.
Yes, I do.
All right. Okay. So a God that could create any possible world created the most perfect possible world,
Which is this one, and every one of them
which
like
is
it.
which is this one right here. Which means that everything that happens in this perfect world happens for a great reason.
Sure.
Right. So when a woman dies in childbirth, or someone is raped, or someone loses their family to an earthquake, or someone is mauled by a bear, doesn't matter what example you put out there. Like, are you going to say, really, that this is the best possible outcome? Now,
well, it's very easy in this situation to think of me as a terrible person. I'm not. I actually love people, and I have great empathy for these things, and my heart breaks for the pain of people. It truly, truly, truly does. But if I look at
it
the
doesn't
long
matter.
term,
that's a contradiction, though, to what
No,
you're
it's
saying. Well, it is, because you're saying this is the perfect world, yet you
Yes.
feel anguish
I
at
didn't say
evil
anguish.
being visited upon other. I'm using a different word than you use. You said your heart
Okay.
breaks. That's anguish.
No.
And you feel anguish at evil being visited upon other people. I mean, so how can
Well,
you
you call it evil. I don't. I said empathy and sympathy. I didn't say anguish. I'm not upset about it at all.
So any wrongdoing that's ever happened in your life happened for the greater good.
Yeah, to put me exactly where I am right now, actually, I don't think they could have been avoided. I think they were absolutely perfect.
So every single bad thing that's ever happened to you
I'll
was
give you an
perfect,
example.
and you're thankful for it.
Sure,
Okay.
absolutely.
And you think that
like-
other people should be thankful for this as well.
No, I'm
They
not
give-
asking anyone to have the same attitude I have. I never
But
said
they
that.
should be. But they should be because it's
No, I think they
it leads to
will
the
be.
perfect world.
I think they will be when they see the larger picture. I think they
So-
will be thankful for it.
So how do you describe anything as a bad act? What would your definition of a bad event?
Oh, I think
happen.
we do horrible things to each other that are truly evil in the strictest sense all the time.
Well, it can't be evil because it's happening for the greater
No,
good.
we have the ability to perform evil.
It
Absolutely. That doesn't mean the earth.
No, it doesn't.
That doesn't
it
mean
doesn't.
the world was created other than perfect. It doesn't mean that because we have an ability to do things that are evil.
Well, no, we don't. Like the onset of all of our decisions, that all of our decisions were known before God even created the world.
Sure.
Okay, which means that he had knowledge of every possible world where the different decisions were made, and he viewed the decisions that we make as the greatest possible decisions we could have made for it to be the perfect world.
Yes.
Right. So every single decision that we make, every single decision that people have,
Was
is not
known
evil.
of in advance.
It's not evil. It's actually the greater good that could have happened to lead to the perfect world that we live in.
I think that's a mistake saying
Well,
that.
Wait, hold on a second. And the other thing is, just a moment ago, you said you don't perceive those things as evil. And
I
then,
don't.
Right, but then you said that people have the capacity to commit evil acts.
Yes, what I mean.
That's a contradiction.
Yes, John, on the face it seems that way. Let me define myself. What I'm saying is that it will be used for good in the eventuality, even though it causes harm in the moment. But that's what I was talking about, other Earths, and this is not the only one, and we're not the only group, and it will definitely be used to benefit others in the future. I would give the example that I love a Snickers bar, but I would eat none of a Snickers bar if 10 other people could have their own full Snickers bar. I would easily do that.
Here's
Right,
something
but the position that you're having here, like I said, like this is a problem for yourself because you have put yourself in this position now
Mhm.
where you cannot actually diagnose any action as moral or immoral, as good or evil.
Oh, that's not true.
Well, it has to be true because
it's not
every
true.
evil act brings about a greater good,
Sure.
the perfect world.
Sure.
So if every evil act this is from your limited scope, you are a fallible being who doesn't
Mhm.
know the workings of the entire universe.
Of course
So
not.
your subjective analysis of something being evil is
Mhm.
wrong because every possible action that could happen is evil. Now, this is the position that you hold.
Well, you have to slow down
Okay.
a bit. Every possible action that could happen is evil. Is that what you said?
Every possible
Why?
action that does happen is good in your worldview.
Eventually,
Because it leads
yes.
to right. So it doesn't matter if your own subjective opinion says, "Well, I think this is evil." In fact, this is where you contradict yourself because
How?
at least you're espousing a position where you express knowledge that it doesn't matter what the action is, it's going to be for the greater good, and then
Sure.
have the audacity to say that some actions are actually evil. Well, your limited scope on this might interpret them as evil, but then on the other side of the coin, you're also saying that your greater scope and understanding the situation means that every single act that you call evil is actually an act that's working for the greater good. So you're
It'll be
talking
used
out
for
of two
good, yeah.
sides. You're talking out of two sides. Your mouth. Then you can't describe anything as evil because it's not. It would be from your very own viewpoint.
Mm-hmm. Why do you use the word audacity? You think I'm being audacious?
I think that you are espousing. When I say audacity, I mean that from your viewpoint, you have this being that has set in motion the events that will lead to the most perfect world out there. Okay, like this is the ultimate being in your worldview. And now, if I had a worldview where I believed in some type of ultimate being that laid out the events that would lead to the perfect world, then for me to even question any events that happened would be, that would make me audacious. To say
Okay, it's
that
only audacious if it's inaccurate. Is that right?
Well, that brings me to a question that came from the chat for you, Richard.
Well,
Is your
hold on a second.
claim?
I mean, he said a lot of stuff
you
there.
hold on a second.
I'm sorry, John. I didn't mean to be rude.
In the chat, they ask, "Is your claim of this being a perfect world, is that simply a belief, or do you claim that as knowledge to know that?"
It's a belief based on my understanding of the text, John. I'm sorry. I wasn't trying to be offensive. I'm sorry.
No, you weren't being offensive. No.
Well, you told me hang on a minute when I asked if I could just finish.
Well, right, because
I'm sorry. You were. I think you were. If you were not offended, I'm just wrong. I'm sorry.
No, I just was doing my job as a mod and trying to get in there. But so you're saying that you believe that, but you don't necessarily claim it as something you know for sure.
Oh, I can't know anything for sure. I'm a human being.
Okay. So it's not a knowledge claim. All right. Go ahead. Continue where you left off there, buddy.
Okay, so Sokka, I don't think that I'm self-defeating, because even though things can be evil and evil acts can be and are committed. I mean, there's a million examples. I won't bother. There's horrible things that happen on this planet every day to decent people even. You know, people are trying to do right by their neighbors and friends and family and stuff. And still horrible things happen to them, sometimes by other human beings. I'm not so concerned about natural disasters and stuff like that. Yes, they're difficult. But they're just natural. God doesn't have to cause those things. They just naturally happen. We call it act of God. I think that's inaccurate. But that's not that doesn't necessarily mean I'm defeating myself when I say that an evil thing can be later used for good. I don't think that's self-defeating at all. I think that's true to life. That say you have a child and your child messes up and you correct them and you use it as a lesson to the other children, and all the other children agree, well, I'm never going to do that. Boy, look at the repercussions of that sort of a mistake. Well, they've learned from another's mistake. Did that one suffer? Yeah. Is that super fair to that one? No, but as a group, it's very beneficial.
Real quick, Richard.
Hold
on. You just a moment ago, you characterized something as evil, and what Sokka was trying to point out to you a few moments ago, you characterized, well, if something evil happens, it still leads to ... You can't even begin to label any action as evil, given the premise that you've laid forth.
Sure.
Yeah,
okay.
And I mean, I'm sorry, like I'm not quite at the point yet where I can be like, hey, it's a good thing Timmy died, because at least now I know my son won't play chicken with a train. You know, like.
No, I'm not saying it's a good thing Jimmy died. I'm saying it's a good thing that your son heard about Jimmy dying. I didn't say it's a good thing Jimmy died. I never said that. At least I wasn't trying to.
Well, it has to be, given what you've laid forth, is that if this is the perfect world and evil doesn't actually exist, then Jimmy dying.
I never said evil doesn't exist. I said evil does exist. It's just going to be used to the best benefit.
Actually,
right, but
you said both.
But the problem with this, like I
I'm
said,
not making myself very clear. Sorry.
Yeah, it's not the problem with you making yourself clear. It's a problem with just the position itself, which is that when every single action is being carried out, because, like I said, like the foundations of the world, like the events of the world were laid out prior to creation. God knew exactly which world He was creating, including the choices and actions of every single person. Now we can discuss whether or not this means we have free will or not, but let's just imagine that we do have free will.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but that free will can only act in accordance to the plan that God has laid out. Which means that every single action out there. Well, is it possible that does God know the every single event that's going to happen from now until the end of time? Every single choice that I'm going to make.
Well, I would actually need a definition of God first, not to be difficult. But I don't think my definition of God and your definition of God are the same thing.
Okay.
My definition of God is a lineage goes so far back that we kind of can't even understand what that means in real terms with our brains. Like so far back into the universe, so far back in time that we can't even imagine what that really means. It's just like it's theoretical to us. It would strike us as theoretical time, and that it's a lineages of an occurrences of it's a lineage of occurrences of an earth and a hero, which in Christianity would be called Christ, and other things it's called other things. So I think God is a culmination of Christs, and each of them would have been on their own earth and had their own experiences, and that shared experience over time would make them like such a huge knowledge base, like just gigantic. So it's not a very Christian definition, but it is a very biblical definition.
That essentially the Christ is the God is like Doctor Who, like.
You could kind of look at it that way, couldn't you?
Sure.
Wow. Hey, Cerberus, you still with us?
Yeah.
So, anything you'd like to add to what's going on right now?
I mean, I'm just very quickly, I guess, on where we're at currently. I'm not sure if I would describe that as a definition. But that might just be me personally.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, that's another problem. I wasn't going to bring this up, Richard, but the issue with your definition is it's like, okay, fine, I'll define God. He's undefinable. like,
okay, I'll define God more closely if you like.
Okay,
more carefully. He says he started out as a slave that was freed. Okay, so then there was some other kind of being that made him. But apparently they did such a good job of making him, they had to give him his freedom. He wasn't good as a slave. And then he started this thing. So he's very against, he likes to use words like slavery because it's something he truly, truly detests. Because he was born into slavery himself. Apparently has a mate. Apparently had huge technology just like gifted to him from the start and has only made strides forward from there. And how long ago and how far away that was, I think my brain probably can't understand what that means.
I'm assuming we're using technology in like a loose sense of the word. Like
I don't know why you said that.
Well, I'm assuming we're not talking about God had technology as in he knew how to make 20 rocks.
Like a spaceship and time traveler and stuff, whatever.
What would God need with a starship?
Well, if you have flesh and you want to move away from one planet, you need a starship.
Yeah, I was quoting Star Trek. Never mind.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed it.
So do you believe? One of the standard kind of seriously proposed God definitions out there involves certain characteristics, like them being a disembodied mind.
I think that's insanity. I've never seen an example of a disembodied mind. I don't think anyone has.
No, I agree.
Okay, I think that's insanity.
So your God is made of flesh and bone.
He claims it about 5 times in the Bible alone.
So he's basically he's like a Superman-like figure. And I'm not talking about the cartoon character.
Well, no, you're making him a singular individual, which is something I said is not what I understand the text to be describing. I didn't say he was a singular Superman-like individual.
So he's kind of like a...
Let's call him the first Christ. How about that? That helps.
Okay, well, I was going to say he's kind of like an immortal jellyfish where he just goes through stages.
Well, you know that...
I think he's describing it more. It's more like the Power Rangers. Many become one.
I think Doctor Who still seems like a pretty apt comparison.
Yeah, Doctor Who works pretty good.
But not just Doctor Who, all the Doctor Who's.
Oh, I don't know that much about the series. Is there multiples of Doctor Who in different realities?
Well, no, it's just that many different actors played Doctor Who over the last.
Oh, that's cheating. That's all one person. Yeah, you have to ignore the characters. Who's 007? But anyway.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's actually in the show where he like incarnates with a different body and is like
how
slightly
convenient
different
for the show.
Yeah, right.
That was smart. That was really smart. Okay, so what I'm saying is that science right now today, we are trying to defeat all diseases. We are trying to defeat aging. We are trying to become space travelers. We are trying to get at least some portion of us off of this planet to discover other planets that are Earth-like, and maybe perfect start a society based on our present knowledge better than the one we have here. Gosh, does that sound familiar? That's us literally playing God, literally.
Or are we trying to create a new reality that we think is like, I mean, for where we can posit a bunch of subjects that worship us?
No, that's a Christian. Well, that actually goes outside of Christianity too. That the gods are empowered by praise. No, I don't see anything like that actually described. I think that those are views of the text. That is, they're extra textual, not extraterrestrial, but extra textual. So I don't know. I think it's kind of off topic. It's a huge assumption that some religious sects make.
I mean, like, if you want to define God as essentially like some type of like space traveling superhero, I mean, okay.
Well, I don't do that arbitrarily. You know, I get that from the text. For instance, if you look up the definitions of the words Moses or Noah or Melchizedek, like Melchizedek, the name Melchizedek literally means king of peace, king of righteousness, king of being right. And it says that he abides the highest forever, having no mother, no father, and no lineage. That's a biblical description of Melchizedek. So who could Melchizedek be besides God? He's calling himself Melchizedek. He also calls himself Noah, Moses. I can back all this up. He calls himself different names. So Moses, born into slavery, raised by his enemy, is a story of the beginning of God.
Wait a minute, that popping noise.
The Epic of Gilgamesh.
That popping noise you just heard, that was my head exploding. So when you spoke of God came from slavery,
yeah,
you're saying that the story or the character of Moses from the Bible, that's just another face of God. That's just another.
It's also the Epic of Gilgamesh. It's the same story, but he's talking about himself. He's doing like a narrative so we can overhear, so to speak.
So, okay. So that was the beginning of God. So, so God didn't exist until after the beginning of the time of pharaohs.
Yeah, that's the claim that I see in all the text.
Okay. All right. Geez.
No. Whoa. Did you just say the time of pharaohs on this earth?
Well, I didn't say on this.
It has no historical value of this earth. I tried to say that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying God was invented by the pharaohs of Egypt. That's not what I said.
No, I didn't say that either. I said because like Moses came after the pharaohs.
No. It's not a history lesson.
Remember, it's not literal, Saka.
Okay.
It's not a history lesson. He's using things we can understand to explain things we don't understand.
Well, and so also the Bible isn't chronological then either in your mind.
Is the Bible chronological? Well, the way I see it here's one of those rules that Cerberus was trying to ask for earlier. Here's one of those rules. Here's the logic. Man's not perfect. Man is perfected by God. Man is perfected by God in heaven. God is working with man. God is not resting. There's been no Sabbath. So there hasn't been a Sabbath day. That's talking about our ascension. That begins our Sabbath day. So that puts us in the 6th day of creation right now. So all of the Bible actually fits in the 6th day in the book of Genesis. That's why it's this huge general overview. But there has been no 7th day. In fact, keeping the Sabbath holy just means, hey, remember, I'm coming back for you.
You know, Richard, I think that like this kind of goes back to a point that I made earlier, which is that if you treat the Bible as analogous, you can pretty much make it say whatever you want it to say. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily like in your case, like that you're wrong. Okay. But I will say that I don't see it. I think that the direction that you've gone with this is that it would almost seem to be easier to kind of build up a concept of God inside your own mind that is kind of more, I don't know, like that doesn't have to have the baggage of having to try to go through the class, like the Bible, and try to shape it to that. But I honestly, like, I don't really know where else to go with this conversation. Once we get to like God is an like interdimensional or space explorer in the flesh, like it's like, okay, that's cool. I don't agree with you, but I think that
Could you disprove it with scripture?
Yeah, I can actually.
No, you can't.
I can.
No, actually, you can't. You can only disprove it with dogma, which means nothing.
No, I could. Like if I take the Bible as analogous as you, like I said, the Bible is nothing but a cookbook. In which case, everything that you're saying is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But that's going to take a huge study of for me to really break down what is actually intended. For me to really dive into the author's intent. So we can bake the really good.
How much time?
I
tried to ask you this earlier. How much time would that take? Because this was accomplished in me in less than a week with no studying.
Oh man, if I wanted to sit down and do like a analogous kind of like translation of the Bible, analogous interpretation of the Bible into a cookbook, I bet it could probably take me 6 days, and on the seventh I'll rest.
That's cute. It's pretty funny.
I will say this, Richard. Your interpretations of the Bible are certainly the most interesting I've ever heard.
Well, it causes me to have love and forgiveness for self and forgiveness for others. And just because I think something is true, it actually humbles me to the point that I can honestly say, I'm flawed. I don't have a perfect mind. I don't have perfect reasoning. I don't have anything at all that's perfect, in fact. So, that's why I want to do a lot of these. I want to have these conversations. And don't think that I'm going to walk away from this going, oh, whatever. I'm going to really sit and think about this for, many, many, many hours, much longer than the conversation itself.
Well, I can tell you like that, like when it comes to like me being an atheist, like I'm an atheist in regards to, sorry, and I don't, this is kind of like a philosophical term. It's not supposed to be demeaning, but like seriously proposed God concepts. So when I say that your God concept is not within the realm of what is generally talked about when we talk about seriously proposed God concepts. Not to say it isn't serious, it's just not within that line.
I didn't take it as an insult.
Okay. So within like in there's certain characteristics, I think I agree. Like when people describe their God as a disembodied mind, for example, like I think that's ludicrous.
It is.
And but I think that's a characteristic that I have to argue against. These transcendental, like this transcendental entity that like I said, lives outside of time and space, and farts the universe into existence, and somehow is the moral arbiter of everything. Those type of God concepts. Like that's in relation to what I talk about in regards to my atheism. So at this point of the conversation, like what you put forward as a God concept, doesn't fall in line with what I would put forward as a seriously proposed God that I have to, offer some type of justification in not believing in.
I can show it in definition and in context. It's consistent.
Well, in some ways, Richard, what you have described tonight doesn't even sound like a God. It sounds like you're describing a more advanced alien species that's not human.
Well, what do you mean by not human? That's the problem.
I'm saying that you're describing an advanced alien species that is something other than human. It sounds like.
Whether by CRISPR or freedom of what we have in the past, and I'm using this term generally, I know it's not accurate, what we've called or sometimes deemed junk DNA, there's two schools of thought: improvement by dissection and improvement by freedom. Well, we don't know exactly what improvement by freedom would do, but we're trying it out. I mean, there's one lab that I know of in Southern California being funded by the United Nations, where $5+ million per year is poured into one lab on that research. But we do know that there are saving injury and certain other catastrophic events already eternal beings on this planet. We already know that, and we're very likely eventually we would become eternal beings traveling. We're inclined to do what they're claiming they already did. We're actually, this is what we want.
Hey, real quick, breaking news, and which I wasn't aware of. Sokka says he closed his Patreon account and he is no longer a serious YouTube content creator. I am crushed beyond belief. And I wonder why Patreon is still taking the $1 out of my account every month.
It shouldn't be, because like I closed my Patreon right down back in before August hit. So
yeah, they took the $1 at the beginning of August.
Oh well, those assholes. Oh, you know what? It actually, I might have shut it down actually the first week of August. It was
okay, because I do know that they're right on the money, like midnight on the 1st. They take that shit. So
yeah, it was. I did the the serious YouTube content creator thing for about 3 weeks, and it was funny, and I appreciate my. I think I got up to 10 Patreons. And I'm just like, and because it started off as a joke, you know, like,
right.
just
and I became a patron of yours as a joke as well. I mean,
right, yeah, like I had a lot of friends, like there's a lot of people that were like in on the joke, like of the whole serious YouTube content creator, and like there was like 5 people that did that, and then it got up to like I think I got like 7 other Patreons, and like I didn't recognize who some of them were. And I'm like, fuck, like
people are really starting to do it.
This is like shit. Like people got to stop giving me money because I'm not actually going to produce anything. Like
you're like, yeah, it's okay if some of my buddies do this as a joke, but man, I can't take advantage of these people who don't know any better.
Right? Yeah. Like so, like people were signing
but
up
you
for my
still have
Patreon.
no justification for that morality. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, so I'm just like, okay, you know what? Like, okay, hey, sorry guys, like, I'm not gonna be putting out a new me trashing Skyot video every couple of weeks because, that fruit is, that's old now. Like nobody takes Skyot seriously. Like, so there's really no point in making this. Nah, nobody does. It was hilarious. Like, listening to like talking to people like after Skyot leaves the room, and it's just like what a train wreck that guy is.
Well, and he said it. He has said several times in the live chat tonight that cut Sokka off. He'll talk for 20 minutes. That's why I interrupt him every minute or two. I'm like, I said, Sky out in the chat. I said, you've never successfully interrupted Sokka. Well, and I'll tell you what, if people want to see something, tongue in cheek that I thought was funny. I do a feature channel on nearly every GDC broadcast I do on Saturday nights, and a while back Sokka was the feature channel, and it was just like 15-20 minutes of sock puns and nonsense. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was gonna say this, like, because this shit kills my battery fast, so I actually have to get off here soon because my phone's going to die.
Well, I was thinking about wrapping it up anyway. So before your battery dies, Sokka, why don't you go ahead and give your final thoughts, and then let everybody know anything else you want them to know.
Yeah, this is a fun talk, Richard. Like I said, like there's some really interesting concepts we're dealing with here, like the problem of evil and the nature of God, and like biblical historical criticism. I think that those things are really interesting topics, and so I appreciate having them with you.
I thank you a lot. Thank you.
And I'm going to keep this really short because I just dropped down to 1%, so I'm probably going to drop off any second now. So thanks for watching, guys.
All right, Sokka. Talk to you soon. And Dragnot left a message in the internal chat a while back that he would be muted and not be back. because he's doing the family thing right now. So Cerberus, your final thoughts, and if you want to let people know where they can find you on social media, please do.
Oh, well, I mean, I've been holding on to a question for like almost 50 minutes.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, yeah.
Because I mean, Sky Out is right. You have to interrupt Sokka.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
So I had a question. Like, why is it that you have this interpretation and this knowledge from this interpretation when it seems like even the ancient Hebrew didn't?
Yeah, that's scary, right? That scares the crap out of me, actually.
But how answer his question though? Like how?
Well, no. Well, I mean, I'm assuming with that answer, he doesn't have a good answer for it.
I do have
Like,
a good answer for you, but I mean, you in the last of that, you kind of pointed out how weird this is. Yeah, it's super weird, and the scariest part of that for me is that it works. Okay, and beyond that, I was uneducated. I didn't even know about this kind of stuff. So, and I wasn't interested in learning, for that matter. I was pretty happy being a rum and coke, having women on my arm. I was pretty happy with that. And by default, I've kind of become a preacher, which is really super strange for me. All my family have had to investigate me individually to make sure I haven't lost my mind. So yeah, it came by way of what I could only identify as a waking dream. And that interpreted David and Goliath. As I said, the only story I could remember from my childhood. That's funny, Sky Out. Thank you. Yeah, I've learned nothing from Sky Out. Thank you, sir. I've learned things not to do. No, I have learned things. No, that's true. I've learned to not be unreasonable. I'm not picking on Sky Out. I think he's brilliant, but I think it's all humor.
Wait, hold on. You just referred to Sky Out as brilliant?
Brilliant, yes. I think he's brilliant.
I don't think you know what that word means, Richard.
I think it means really, really, really smart. I mean, no one could be that stupid. He must be super smart. So, okay, so it was what I can only call I was awake. I was reading the story. I was on a friend's couch. I didn't even own a Bible. I didn't see any reason in having a Bible. It looked like she never cracked hers open either. But anyway, I read the story, and the story, like descriptive stories, our brain will like automatically make a movie of it. So my brain made a movie of it, and I was like all good with that. And it was very mainstream, scholarly kind of a description in my head, right? And then, which I didn't really have a good metric for that either. But then the movie took over and everything changed, and it became the solar system. Okay, now I never would have thought of that. I don't know somebody who's thought of that. I think when it comes to astronomy, physics, math, and science, I'm probably one of the most ignorant people you've ever met. And I didn't care. I was a heavy equipment operator. Like I'm a wrench bender, man. I don't know about this stuff. So when this happened, I immediately went to NASA.gov and said, there can't be moons over Jupiter. Click, 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 enter. Guess what? There are. Well, they can't be flammable. Click, 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 enter. Guess what? They are. So, I mean, 100% of the story as the planets works in reality. And I didn't guess that. I didn't make it up. I didn't want it to be true. I wanted it to be not true. So what I'm saying is, it's not pareidolia. It can't be. I didn't give a crap. I wasn't trying to prove something true. This is not my theory. I'm not this smart. And I didn't care. Again, this is not my theory. I've never heard of this from any book, preacher, blah, 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 blah. It came in a movie in my head, and I'm still trying to disprove it on a constant basis. I don't see anyone who can disprove it yet, including me.
Okay, so when you said before you didn't come up with this, you mean that this was almost like a natural revelation, in a sense.
I've never done hallucinogenics. I've never done shrooms or
no revelation.
Peyote
No, he's not talking about drugs. He just said this was revelatory. It was like a natural.
No, I caught that. I just wanted to qualify.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
that
Yeah,
I
go ahead.
couldn't have been having a flashback. I never did any of that stuff. Yes, the dream took over and I was sober and I was on a friend's couch in the middle of the day. But the dream took over. I couldn't and I know what lucid dreaming is. I'd been doing lucid dreaming for years. I tried to make lucid the dream. I could not take control of it, even though I was awake having a dream in my friend's living room. Like, I didn't even have a choice. It just happened.
I mean, that paints a little better picture because before admittedly, it was an assumption. I was working under the assumption that someone told you, like another person.
Well, I
explain this
believe
to
a
you.
living entity, and it requires a living entity to have communication. I believe a living entity did make a movie in my head.
Okay, well, but I was when I say that, I mean like some human guru or teacher, right? Well,
Oh, no.
But you mean something more like God, essentially.
Well, I mean, I can conclusively say that though there are bits and tiny pieces of this all over the planet now that I'm looking for them, there's no cogent story that actually makes it all work together. That doesn't exist anywhere on this planet. And besides that, I was also ignorant of the little tiny tidbits. Yes, pareidolia. Yes. Anyway, you have to have desire to have pareidolia. So sorry, Chemo Maki.
Oh, that's Chemo is saying good old fashioned pattern seeking comes to mind.
Yeah,
It's something
you have to
that-
have desire to seek.
No,
See, the
no, you
keyword
don't.
Seek.
Wait, but do you?
Why would I seek?
Well,
I
no,
didn't. It just happened to me.
right, but what I'm saying is okay. Pattern seeking doesn't mean conscious seeking. Doesn't necessarily mean a conscious seeking. Like okay, do you think about blinking your eyes?
Sometimes, sometimes not.
Well, I mean, most of the time not. It just
Now you're
happens.
making me think about it.
And so you're concentrating. No, what Chemo is saying is that pattern seeking is ingrained into our the way our mind works.
Okay, tell me how to pattern seek without looking at something. Tell me that.
I'm not saying that you necessarily don't look at things because you're seeing patterns in things that you observe, whether it be
Sure.
with your eyes or your ears or
Do you-
whatever.
Okay,
And
so
then-
along with that pattern seeking, I should be able to imagine accurately the chemistry of Io and Jupiter, right? Did I imagine that?
I don't remember making that claim though.
No. The pareidolia accusation is making that claim, not you, John. I'm answering to the audience question that you brought up
Right, but
or comment.
what he's saying is that pareidolia is only one part of apophenia.
Right.
Okay, and he's saying that human beings just naturally seek out patterns. It's
Which
part of
which
how our-
patterns do they seek
Hold on.
out?
Well, that's not the point. It's the fact that that's the way our mind works. It's evolutionary. Okay, if it wasn't for that ability of our minds, we may not have evolved. It's part of like
It's certainly a survival technique. Yes.
Yeah, it's part of survival. I mean,
Yes, I understand that.
but at any rate, look, we've gone 2.5 hours. I'm a
Really?
very old. Yeah, and I'm a very old man. And
John,
and
how
I'm
old are you really? You're only like late 50s, right?
mid 50s. That's
Mid 50s. Okay.
so I want to go back to closing things out here. It's been very interesting. I don't want to get going down another rabbit hole. So let's go back to and let Cerberus have his final words. And if he has anything he wants to share about where to find him on social media or YouTube, please do.
Oh, yeah, no, this was fun, and don't find me.
Okay, that's awesome. I like that. And don't find me, he says. Richard, your final thoughts, and please let everybody know where they can find you if you'd like to.
Well, I never got a chance to give proper respect to Cerberus and Dragnot and yourself, John. Thank you, and also Sock Account. And I really appreciate all the input. You know, in defending my position does not mean that I can't be wrong. It just means that and if I want to really dig into this, I can't just accept everything. I have to argue against it so I can really investigate these things. And I appreciate anyone's help who does this for me, with me. and you can set up. I'll agree to any channel, anytime, no notice, no demands. You can talk about any part, or you can attack me and say, oh, you're a horrible, immoral human being because God's immoral. And we can talk about anything you want. Just email me at all lowercase, no special characters, no spacing. The email I've had for years, which is my only email, Richard Curtis, Curtis, Richard Curtis Madsen, Madsen, Richard Curtis Madsen at gmail.com. And Cerberus, do you have any kids? Because I would thank you for being a dad too. I think that's super cool.
I got 3 of them.
Oh, thanks for your dad work, bro.
And now, Richard, is it okay if when I put guest info in the pinned comment to put that email in there for people to get a hold?
I'm open, man. I'm totally open. I'm not hiding anything.
Awesome. Well, I will do that. And I also want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Thanks, Saka, Dragnot, Cerberus. And I especially want to thank you, Richard. You know, you came in at the last moment, and we were able to frame the conversation around your ideas. And this broadcast owes itself to you for certainly. And
well, I want to do a lot more of these. I mean, if you want to improve your mind, you got to be with smarter people. So that's what I'm trying to do. I mean, I'm uneducated. I barely graduated high school.
Well, if you want to associate with,
I'm way behind the power curve.
If you want to associate with smarter people, I would suggest that you stay away from Sky Out. But
that's terrible, John. Maybe true.
Just to real quick plug a few things. Tomorrow night, I'll be back on this channel with Nakasuchi, modding a conversation between him and scientist Maddie, I believe is the person.
She's so smart and sweet.
Okay, so I did say that. I did say that right. Okay, and so look for notification of that from Nakasuchi. I don't remember what time he said it was going to happen, but tomorrow evening at some time. This Saturday on the Great Debate Community, I will have on In Time, the new YouTube channel In Time, which is Nick Suter and Ansgar Odison, Odison's new channel. They're going to be the feature channel this week, and they've chosen the panel discussion will be about Hong Kong and what the U.S. role in Hong Kong should be. And that'll be at, I believe, 8 p.m. Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern Saturday night, unless we need to change it because of, guest scheduling. And then
support Naka, like and subscribe.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Yeah. And absolutely. And a week from tonight, back on this channel, on Nakasuchi's channel, I'm going to be joined by Dr. Misha Griffith, Jerry Griffith, Dr. Josh Bowen, and Megan Lewis, and Callan, one of the administrators on Naka's Discord server. And we're going to have a discussion about Norse mythology. And that'll be at 7:15 p.m. Eastern. That broadcast will begin. And I ask you to join us. And hold on, I'm getting a. Okay, I think that's for me. It's Nakasuchi is saying tomorrow. The broadcast tomorrow is going to be starting at 7 Eastern time, 7 p.m. Eastern time. And again, next week the discussion on Norse mythology. Please join us for that. That should be great. I did a broadcast a few months back with the Griffiths and Josh and Megan, and it was super. And this should be another fun one. So
hey, John,
again,
are you still doing GDC, the Great Debate Community? Are you still doing that?
Yeah, I just got done telling you and everybody else what I'm going to do this Saturday.
Right. So, well, I know, but what I was wanting to say was you threatened once that you could get me and Dr. Josh together. I'm still looking forward to that.
I remember I asked him about that at one point. I can't remember when it was. And all he basically said was that, yeah, I would do that. He goes, I love Richard, so
I love him too. He's a really brilliant guy.
Yeah. And I think he might have misinterpreted what I was saying, like as far as like getting you two together as if it would be like adversarial. when he already considers you a friend and everything like that. So that might be, I mean, that might be why we never really got on the same page about that, but I'll definitely mention it to him again.
Yeah, I'd love to have a talk with him, on just a singular venue, just he and I. That'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. I'll try and make that happen for sure.
That'd be
Either
great,
on
John.
one of my channels or possibly have Nakasuchi do it on his channel here and have you two on, because he's a real good friend of Dr. Josh's as well.
Sure.
And when I say as well, I'm comparing Nakasuchi to you, Richard. I would not presume to be a good friend of Dr. Josh. I haven't known him that long. But anyway, hey, thanks to everybody who joined us tonight on the panel and in the audience.
In the audience, yeah.
It's been a great time. I can't wait to come back and do this again. Always want to thank Nakasuchi for allowing me to do this. I was honored when he asked me to start doing this once a week. And as Nakasuchi says, be the conversation.